Welcome to a holiday special King of Cups. Anyway, this is a Valentine's Day spectacular. It is a slightly a continuation, a unplanned sequel spin-off of sorts, like spinning web to our Moray and the Fabric of Creation video. We talked about the spider as a symbol throughout culture, from movies and comics with Spider-Man all the way back to the Moray and other myths and folklore. And in that video, we talked about the character of Madam Web and the archetype, the energy that she stands for, and was not planning on doing a continuation from that. And then, in true King of Cups fashion, something that happens to me quite often, and I think many people who are insightful, follow their intuition in certain areas, and knows how society or a certain industry works, they can usually do this as well, or they have pretty accurate predictions. And my prediction that I had made from this announcement of the Madam Web movie and its casting, I had said that they were doing a very specific marketing technique that Hollywood likes to do, which we'll get into in a moment. And oh, how right I was. Now, to preface our conversation, that the branch and I will have, because again, as always, the branch is here with us, with all his helpful links and knowledge and everything else that he brings to the table. To preface it, I will say we are not here to this to be cynical or judge any person or anything that a moviegoer may like. We are just here to have a conversation about Madam Web, about Valentine's Day, and about how sex appeal sells in the movie industry and the archetypes that they are invoking with all this. And we are going to, of course, book in this conversation with a more positive example of it with romance. How there is a difference between desire and romance. So we're going to be in it with a little bit of background on rom-coms and Valentines and all the lovey-dovey stuff that is all positive and fluffy and fun and sweet. But first, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty with this, because it's a very the marketing tactics that they are using for this Madam Web movie is so interesting to kind of spark a conversation for this belated Valentine's Day special. And yeah, welcome, Branch, to this episode.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for hosting once again. And yeah, don't you think the timing of this movie was kind of serendipitous with
Yeah,
it being Valentine's Day and all? You said it hadn't occurred to you at first, right?
yeah. I had made I made the prediction when they announced the movie Madam Web, and that all these young girls are going to play these young versions of the characters. And I kind of like halfway joking was like, oh, well, they just are aging the characters down so they can get, attractive actresses to play them to get people to want to buy seats because, you know, the sex appeal element of it. And then it didn't occur to me that Dakota Johnson's film history. It did not occur to me that yes, it was coming out, being released on Valentine's Day itself, which it really isn't a Valentine's Day date night movie. Another movie that came out like a day or two before Valentine's Day, Lisa Frankenstein, which I actually did see. I have not seen Madam Web, so um, another thing I'll say is we're not really talking about the plot of the movie, but the marketing around it, the production around it, is what this conversation is going to be about. And it's going to be interesting nonetheless. And so, yeah, 2 days before Valentine's Day, we had Lisa Frankenstein come out. And I went and saw it. And it's what you would picture for a teen date night movie, like some teenagers going on a date, to the movies for Valentine's go see, would be something like Lisa Frankenstein or something like this. But then you have this Madam Web movie, who they are marketing as, a Valentine's Day package. I don't think it would make a good, like, how would your partner feel like bringing them to the theater and watching what seems to be like a disastrous movie? I don't think it would. I don't
Well,
think it
I
would.
see what you mean, but they had kind of planned for it to be released during this week, right? So imagine you're part of a couple just going out for a date night, right? You're going to have the choice between Lisa Frankenstein, Madam Web, or whatever else is there right now. And so, who do you said their demographic that they were aiming at is these young couples? Is that
Yeah, I would
essentially the
presume.
demographic?
Yeah, it would be the younger couplers. I think Lisa Frankenstein would probably be more the teenage group, like the high school age, where Madam Web will probably be the more 20 somethings. Um, and, the 20, 30 somethings, the Marvel fans, because there are, female Marvel fans and stuff, like that. So yeah, that would predominantly be their target audience. Because of course, when directors, writers go to a producer and try to greenlight a film to get investment, one of the things that they ask for is, what is your target audience, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why um, genres, trends, franchises are important to corporate Hollywood because that is a selling point to them. And So Marvel movies, comic book movies, regardless if they're good, regardless if they're cinema, there are directors like Martin Scorsese and stuff that say, you know, they're not really cinema. They are just a fun fair ride.
Entertainment.
Yeah. Um, and so and Madam Web, part of the Marvel Spider-Man, franchise would be able to sell tickets to maybe some lonesome comic book fans or comic book couples, and things like that. So there is marketing ability there, and it's very interesting from a more spiritual, metaphysical sense on um, why they would release this movie on Valentine's Day and with all the archetypes that they are invoking, right?
Because there's not really a male component to this movie, right? Other than the
No,
bad guy.
yeah, it's all female driven, which is awesome. Madam Web is a very powerful, strong female character, um, and I do enjoy the Madam Web character from um, the Spider-Man mythos. It's a very fascinating character to me, and the fact that they had to completely come out with something different for this movie um, is so strange. To almost, it's one of those cases where they want to make a strong character, a strong female character, but instead of just drawing from the strengths of the archetypes that it's based on,
Yeah.
they are doing something completely different.
Well, may
That
I interject for a moment?
Yeah,
So, okay, another strong female lead character that was in the news recently was Brie Larson with, what was it, some type of Miss Marvel or whatever they called it. And
yeah.
so, how is that different from this? Because otherwise, why couldn't they have released Miss Marvel during Valentine's Day? That doesn't seem like it would have been quite as good of a fit. Whereas this strangely seems to fit. So what's the difference? Maybe that's
The
a good way to springboard into this.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the difference and the reasoning for tying Madam Web to Valentine's Day, that will be our first question will be answering with um, these links that um, the brains and I have. So um, we can get started and we can work our way to the answer of that question. And
Okay.
so again, um, if you want more detail on Spider-Man and the Moray, the spider symbol, we have like a 3-hour video of a spider celebration called Moray and the Fabric of Creation on the King of Cups channel. Um, to start us off, though, we are going to briefly go back over um, the Madam Web, Christina Web character. Um, so yeah, Brance, did you want to read a little bit of this?
Sure. And I also thought of a good pun. You referenced our Moray, our Amore episode. So I thought I would say, When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, it's amore. We're talking about Valentine's Day, so I couldn't help myself. I thought it was a pretty good pun.
Thank you. That was awesome.
It reminds me of the scene in Lady and the Tramp where they're sharing the spaghetti meal at the restaurant, like a Valentine's Day meal. Anyway, so one of the other differences I would kind of cite, you said as we are reading this, we'll kind of uncover the answer to that question. So I think right out the gate, what's kind of interesting is that Captain Marvel, is that what they call her? Or is it?
Yeah, the Brie Larson character, just Captain Marvel.
So you would kind of just assume Captain Marvel's male, because you normally would associate military with the male, right? And so in her character, it's like they're trying to make her masculine. And whereas in Madam Web, well, a madam implies that she's single, and that it is indeed a female. So I think with the two characters, as even though they're both strong female leads, this is the female. They're embracing more the feminine, I think, with this character than with Captain Marvel. It's like, well, you probably could have just swapped the gender with Captain Marvel, and it would have been the same movie essentially, right? But you probably couldn't have done that so easily with this. I mean, you make Madam Web Mr. Web, and suddenly it's like, well, you know. But what I think is so interesting about the two comparisons is you do have a male and female version of both Captain America and Spider-Man. And so I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time there balancing those two, but I just think that they're tapping into those archetypes, like you mentioned.
It reminds me the difference between like Mother Nature and like a Pan type character, right? Or they're both representing elements of nature. Well, Mother
but
Nature
from different polarities.
And Pan, or they come from, they're very rooted in these masculine and feminine archetypes, and highlighting that side of nature. So that's what that reminds me of.
And I suppose because her name is this, we can dwell for a moment on her name, Cassandra Webb. Well, Andra refers to human. Not real sure what Cass means, but Andra is more specifically female, whereas Andro is male, referring also to human. Andra, Andro, both human but gender-based. So Cassandra, we already know with the dra, okay, this is a female human type thing we're dealing with here. But also one of the famous Cassandras from Greek myth is, I think she was Jason of the Argonauts. I think they had taken Cassandra along with them, or that might have been a different character. But anyway, Cassandra had been cursed, I think, by Hera to always know the future, but that nobody would ever believe her. And so I think that her name being that could be a hat tip to her. So I haven't seen this movie, but I would be kind of interested as to whether or not, like when she dispenses with her prophecies to these people, do they not believe her? And if so, I think that would be kind of getting back to the Cassandra syndrome, which I don't have a link for, but there's actually a wiki page for Cassandra syndrome. It's actually something that can be diagnosed even. Like if somebody pretends to know the future, but nobody believes them, well, they would be noted as suffering from Cassandra syndrome, because that was the curse of Cassandra. But yes, I'll continue reading. I just wanted to kind of mention those things there because they didn't fit quite as perfectly anywhere else as they did there. But we'll be getting into the blind seer archetype as well, which, again, it kind of references Cassandra there, although she wasn't blind. Madame Web, Cassandra Webb, is a fictional character appearing in American comic books published by Marvel Comics. I think it's interesting to note here that it's Marvel Comics because we had a discussion over the phone maybe a few days ago about how this movie was intended to be a bridge between the MCU and something or other,
Yeah.
right? Because like there's this Sony rift between the franchises. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we can get into that when it comes up.
Oh, okay. She first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 210, published November 1980, and was created by writer Denny O'Neil and artist John Romita Jr. She is usually depicted as a supporting character in the Spider-Man comic book series, where she appears as an elderly woman with myasthenia gravis, connected to a life support system resembling a spider web. Well, let's see what that is. So a myasthenia gravis is a long-term neuromuscular junction disease that leads to varying degrees of skeletal muscular weakness. Most commonly affects muscles of the eyes. So basically, she's got paralysis with her eye muscles and her face muscles. So yeah, that's. Let me see if I can get a little bit more. Characterized by double vision, drooping eyelids, even difficulties in talking and walking. So basically, it's facial paralysis, kind of like Bell's palsy. It seems like, and I don't know, is the character portrayed in that way in this movie? Seems like she has all of her faculties with her, right?
Yeah, this is possibly before she's in the situation she is in most of her depictions.
Now, don't you know, though, why she's blind? Is it a result of her second sight and she just becomes that way? Because she's not necessarily born that way in the comic book, right?
Yeah, it's I think it's connected to her abilities.
Okay, it's like the price she paid from drinking from the well, huh? Kind of like how Odin loses an eye to gain wisdom from drinking from the well, or in Dune, Moadib goes blind.
If you scroll down, I'm sure it gives a brief summary of her origin.
Oh, one moment. Fictional character biography. She was born in Salem, Oregon. Oh, that was the 33rd state added to the Union. And also in 2017 with the eclipse, Salem, Oregon was the first city for the eclipse to start in with the shadow. And it went through 7 Salems before exiting the United States. And we're in the 7th year since that. So Cassandra Webb coming out in the 7th year since that eclipse, being born from Salem itself, to me, that's very strange. She is a paralyzed, blind, telepathic, clairvoyant, and precognitive mutant, allowing her to work as a professional medium. She was originally stricken with myasthenia gravis and was connected to a life support system designed by her husband, Jonathan Webb. So she is married. I wonder if he's ever mentioned in the movie, which included a series of tubes shaped like a spider web. When Spider-Man approached her to help find kidnapped Daily Globe publisher KJ Clayton, who's actually an impersonator who staged the kidnapping, Madame Webb used her powers to help him locate and rescue both the real and fake Clayton, but disclosed to him that she already knew his secret identity. So, if you want, I can continue. Is there anything else that you think I should mention?
That's good for now. I scroll back up to the image on top of Madame Web with her and her chair behind all her Yeah. So that is usually the main depiction we see of her is she always sits in a chair with the spider web tubes and stuff behind her, um, which is very
Very infirm
reminiscent.
looking.
Yeah, very very reminiscent of the Empress trope, which we'll be getting into here. So I just wanted to highlight. So keep this image um, of her in mind when we get into these archetypes that they're drawing from. So she is blind. She mentors Spider-Man. She kind of oversees the Spider-Verse, the webs of fate and destiny. Um, she's a madam. She's an elder. So all these things are going to be carried over with the next thing we're going to be talking about. And so, what's the first archetype that we have, Branch?
I was hoping you could maybe weave on the Sony thing real quick before we started
Oh
that.
yeah, oh yeah, so, yeah.
But I'll go ahead.
So
May I go ahead and close this Madam Web tab?
yeah, you can go ahead and close it. Yeah. So that's actually a good idea. So first, before we get into the archetypes of Madam Web, we do have um, this idea that will come up um, later as well when we're talking about um, the actors and the production behind the movie and everything. So we have the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is created by Kevin Feige, who established Marvel Studios once Disney bought out Marvel and assigned him um, to make Marvel movies essentially. Um, and that's where we get the MCU. That's the canon. That's the what is it? Sacred timeline, right? Um, where um, Marvel, um, when um, when Disney bought Marvel, Marvel didn't have all the movie rights for all the characters because they had sold some of them off to try to get more money because they was becoming in debt. Um, so they sold to Universal. They sold Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, and that's why it's hard for them to make a Hulk movie inside the MCU. Is because um, they can only do so much with Hulk.
Is that how
They
we
can
ended
only
up with
have
She-Hulk?
yes, because that's they can only use Hulk within other um, Marvel movies. They can't have a solo Hulk movie unless Universal gives them the permission, the rights, and all that. Since they own the movie rights to Hulk, um, and so that's kind of hard for them. Similar to when how Fox owned the X-Men characters, and then Disney bought Fox. A good reasoning for that was them bringing all the X-Men characters into the MCU. Um, Similarly, Sony are the people that bought Spider-Man. They're the ones that made all the Spider-Man live-action movies um, up until Tom Holland's MCU movies, and they're also the ones that made the Spider-Verse movies, the animated ones. And so Sony owns the movie rights to Spider-Man, and unlike Universal and Fox, Sony leveraged it by striking a deal to share Spider-Man. So that's when they created Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and that's why he's in the MCU, because it's like a shared deal with Marvel Studios, the the MCU,
And may I
and
interject for a moment?
Sony. Yes.
Because I think it fits well here in the middle of your explanation. But you mentioned before how they had kind of roped some of these actresses into the production of Madam Web with this carrot and stick approach, where they thought now they're going to be maybe a reoccurring character in the franchise or something like that. So is that kind of part of
Yes.
this too?
Yeah, in a way. So essentially, um, to kind of finish a little bit of what I was saying to get to that point is so you have Marvel Cinematic Universe and trying to claim all the character rights back and everything for their one universe, and you have Sony who is leveraging it to get profit and share Spider-Man with the MCU. But they also have all these other characters from the Spider-Man mythos, like hundreds of characters that aren't Spider-Man but are ingrained in his mythology that they can use. So since they are staring the Peter Parker Spider-Man with the MCU and he's in there, Sony by themselves have created the Sony Spider-Man Spider-Man-less Spider Universe or the Venomverse or the Sonyverse, and that whatever you want to call it, they don't really have that much of a official title for it as the MCU does, and essentially all that is Sony's Venom movies, the Morbius movie, the Madam Web movie, the Craven the Hunter movie that comes out, and essentially they're doing all these movies of all the characters that surround them in the mythology, and some of them do decently well, um, not, and then others not so much. Um, so
This one here was actually really good though, Across the Spider Verse. So they're not all bad then, right?
yeah, Sony can, um, but that is uh, mainly because it is one, it's different, it's animated, and two, you have Phil Lord and Chris Miller who are um, helming those, and they have nothing to do with the live action movies. So it's kind of its own thing. Um, so yeah, so all the live action stuff either does decent or does really, really bad.
And
And
as we kind of explored in the Moray episode, the Spider Verse itself seems to be like the underpinning for the MCU itself, right? Because there are all these different versions and realities and people, and so I think it's kind of clever in a way how they're given this mechanism to. It
yeah,
still seems like even though they have that, they still aren't doing a great job with it,
yeah,
but they get
they
a lot
have
of
this really
flexibility there.
cool way of linking all the movies and characters together, but they're doing a very sloppy job of it. And so the Kevin Feige like head of this of the Sony movies, Amy Pascal, I believe is her name. Um, she has different opinions of what she wants to do that kind of seems not in line with Kevin Feige stuff. And Amy Pascal really wants to get the big bucks by combining the Sony universe with the MCU, and in doing that, she wanted to use the Man of Web movie and like use the Man of Web movie to kind of connect it to their movies to the MCU to like give more longevity, more credence to their movies. because they know that they can't have a Spider-Man-less Spider franchise, so they're wanting to bring in the MCU Spider-Man, bring in all this, and get people in seats by being a part of the larger Marvel universe. Um, and in doing so, they're jumping the gun. The Venom movies, the Morbius movies, the Madame Web movies, they are making, um, they're creating with the intention to have Easter eggs of Spider-Man to eventually get Spider-Man in there, right? So like little seedlings of Easter eggs to eventually lead up to Spider-Man, and then once they um, get the movie through production, um, Marvel's Kevin Feige is like, no, this is not what we want to be a part of our universe. I mean, Marvel is already having a hard time with their MCU, it seems like, themselves. So they don't want to be a part of this. And so they're having to go back and re-edit the movies to edit the Spider-Man Easter eggs out. Um, and we all know that editing a movie after you've already essentially made the majority of the movie usually isn't a recipe for success. You can't edit ingredients out of a pie once you've already started baking pie.
And this is where we have directors years later wanting a director's cut because for whatever reason they were
Yeah,
forced to do things like this, right?
yeah. And in doing so, um, they are also being misled, not just to the audience to get people in the seats who may not understand that the Sony movies are not the MCU movies, but they are also making empty promises to and being misleading to the actors that they're hiring. And Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, allegedly when they signed on was signing on to be a part of the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise. Um, to the point where Dakota Johnson was getting advice from um, what's her name? Whatever Olsen, Elizabeth
Oh,
Olsen,
yeah, I have
the
a link for that actually.
who plays the Scarlet Witch in the MCU. So, trying to get advice to how it's going to be like to be a part of this larger thing, and they're not really, they're adjacent to the larger thing, but not really, sort of. It's like that meme, like, oh, can we get whatever at home? Um, can we get what, can we get Spider-Man? Can we get the MCU at home? Oh, we already have the MCU at home. And you go home and it's the Sony Marvel movies, uh, sort of thing.
So this lady was what, the Scarlet Witch?
Yes.
Okay.
Um,
So this is an example of her turning to her for advice. She's already part of this union of Sony's. Is that what we're
of,
implying
of,
here? Like, how do I
well,
navigate this strangeness? Or what's she asking her
yes.
about?
Olsen, she's the Scarlet Witch, so she's part of the MCU. She was getting advice on how it was going to be to join the MCU, not possibly not realizing that she wasn't going to be part of the MCU. She's going to be part of a Sony adjacent Sonyverse.
So
franchise.
it's really a lot like the Spider-Verse in that this is like a parallel franchise that's just slightly off from the other original. It's almost like the
Yeah,
Mandela version of Marvel. Something's
yeah,
not quite right, but you can't put your finger on it.
yeah.
And may I
So,
also interject for a moment because you told me another story or shared a link with me perhaps about isn't this you were talking about false promises they make to the actors. It kind of made me remember what was it, the Eternals, and how they had sent those actors and actresses all over the world to promote the movie, but that while they were doing so, it was simultaneously bombing in theaters and stuff. So they kind of felt like they had been sold a farce, you know.
yeah, they was told that it was going to be great and awesome, but then not realizing that it's getting destroyed by critics, so they're having to pretend like it's all good and
And
everything.
one of the guys characterized his experience as traumatic, right? He said he
Y-
had
y-
PTSD from
Yeah,
all the
he has
negative press.
PTSD. Yeah, he's going to therapy. Like,
And didn't
he's
he
like,
also quit the tour like halfway through because of this?
I don't know,
Like they just couldn't go
possibly.
on.
Yeah. I mean, that's also adjacent of, on the DC side of things, of Warner Brothers, with the Batgirl movie and the girl, not being able to play Batgirl, or playing Batgirl, but the movie not coming out, and like getting an injury, doing a stunt for nothing essentially. Like, yeah, empty promises. Um, so yeah, so that's that. You can close that, unless if you wanted to read it, you can close that link down. There
Well,
wasn't
I
much
think
more I
it's
could.
curious to me because even though I'm largely ignorant about a lot of these topics and people, um, I did kind of make the comparison there about the Olson and her, and here she's actually getting advice from her. So I think that's kind of interesting. So
Yeah.
there's some substance there. She was told it was a great time and that she recommended going ahead and doing it. So um, she committed to this role based on the advice of Brie Olson. And of course, how did Captain Marvel perform? Wasn't it also hyped up
Oh,
and then
you
got a lot
you
of negative
you
reviews?
you're getting this confused. She gets advice from Elizabeth Olsen, who's Scarlet Witch,
Oh, I'm
not Brie
sorry.
Larson.
That's not Brie Olson. There's two different Olsons then. Okay, excuse me.
No, that's Brie
Honest mistake.
Larson.
Oh,
Yeah, Brie
Larson, not Olson.
Larson, and then Elizabeth Olsen, two different
Okay.
characters,
Okay, so
two
this
different
lady
people.
is the
She,
uh,
yeah,
Elizabeth Olsen person. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
See, again, I don't know these people well enough. Thank you for correcting me.
yeah, yeah. Scarlet Witch is is a big character
Okay,
in
and
the MCU, and is
now she appeared
loved
in
by
what
fans.
the was this in the Infinity Wars? Was that where that starts to overlap with the
Um,
stones
I
and
mean,
all
yeah,
that
she was
jazz?
part of the Avengers. In she was in the first Avengers movie up until um, the Infinity War stuff. She got the WandaVision spin-off Disney Plus show. She got she was a character in the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness movie. Um, yeah, she's a become a big character, and it seems like a fan favorite of all the characters from the MCU.
So really, what they're somebody like me who doesn't know any better, they want to create enough of an illusion that I'm somebody like me is fooled. The casual lover of Marvel movies or whatever may not even notice the difference, right? But somebody like you it's like apparent and kind of there's a stark contrast, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's it's uh, if we can get people to watch or buy a ticket to watch our movie because of the name of the franchise of the branding, and then the quality doesn't matter.
You
The
got the hook in
content
their
doesn't
mouth.
matter. Yeah.
I'm going to a Marvel
But
movie is what I think when I'm buying this ticket, and then I sit down and it's like the discount version of a Marvel movie, right? The
yeah,
imitation.
exactly. Yeah. Um.
Okay.
So um. So yeah. So that's that. What's next
Now
in
we can begin
this?
our Crone Empress discussion, if you like, because that's the next order, and I have
Okay.
that up here.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So we are, since we've laid the groundwork, we know that there was a Marvel Cinematic Universe, and from the movies to the comics, what holds the Marvel Universe together is the webs of fate and destiny, and it's watched by Madam Web, who is um, a blind mentor, seer, feminine, empress like character, and she helps Spider-Man and all the other Spider people as they traverse and protect the fabric of their reality. So, all that being said, um, we are going to be talking about the Crone archetype. So, this will be the um, elderly woman aspect of the Madam Web. Want to read that for us, Branch?
Absolutely. In folklore, a crone is an old woman who may be characterized as disagreeable, malicious, or sinister in manner, often with magical or supernatural associations that can make her either helpful or obstructive. The crone is also an archetypal figure or a wise woman. As a character type, the crone shares characteristics with the hag. The word became further specialized as a third aspect of the triple goddess, popularized by Robert Graves and subsequently in some forms of neo paganism, particularly Wicca, in which she symbolizes the dark goddess, the dark of the moon, or the end of a cycle, together with the mother crone, the light goddess, and the crone maiden, day goddess. She represents part of the circle of life. The handsome warlock or beautiful witch, good or bad, may change a crone or hag to normal looks, appearance, if so desired. Blessed be the powers intertwined comically, universally. In feminist spiritual circles, a croning quote is a ritual rite of passage into an era of wisdom, freedom, and personal power, similar to many cultures. I find that use of the word era there kind of interesting because that is the space of about 6, 7 years. And of course, what does Taylor call her tour, but the Eras tour, right? So it is kind of a probably a witchy type term there. Um,
Yeah.
I would like to
Um,
continue here because this part I think kind of really captures the essence of Madame Web. According to the
yes.
scholar, pardon,
Oh, so really quick, I was going to say, um, that first part you read, it mentioned how it is connected to the three sisters, or the three fates, or the three weavers. And
Moray.
so we get into all that and more, because they're also called the moray, moray in the fabric of creation video on this channel. So if that appeals to you, or if you're curious, again, I just wanted to highlight we do have that video with a lot more information on it. But yeah, go ahead.
Indeed. According to the scholar Clarissa Pinkola Estes, the crone is, quote, the one who sees far, who looks into the spaces between the worlds, and can literally see what is coming, what has been, and what is now, and what underlies and stands behind many things. The crone represents the ability to see, more than just with one's eyes alone, but to see with the heart's eyes, with the soul's eyes, through the eyes of the creative force and the animating force of the psyche. So I felt like that captured the essence of what they were going for with this particular character. And it also reminds me a lot of the Kwisatz Haderach in Dune,
Yes,
who also becomes
indeed.
blind eventually.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah,
Except
exactly.
he would be the male version of this. Mhm.
Yeah. Did he
This
want me to
might be
pull?
a little interesting too,
Yeah.
to just kind of read a little bit of the where the word comes from. As a
Yeah.
noun, crone entered the English language around the year 1390, deriving from the Anglo-French word caragne, an insult, itself deriving from the Old Norse French charagne, caragne, meaning a disagreeable woman, literally meaning carrion. Prior to the entrance of the word into English, the surname Hopcrone is recorded from around 1323 to 1324. Clarissa Pinkola Estes suggests that the word crone may derive from the word crown or la corona. It's funny because I thought of that word when we started talking about it, but I just didn't mention it. While a crown is known as a circlet that goes around the head and establishes one's authority as a leader, before this understanding, quote, the crown la corona was understood to mean the halo of light around a person's body. La corona was considered to shine more brightly when a person was clear, filled with love and justice. Thus, Estes suggests the crone is one who reflects this enhanced degree of clarity and insight. So I would wonder if Madame Web follows this tradition closely or loosely, but that's something else I just wanted to read there. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm glad that you scroll down more. Yeah. Um, I believe, because, there's plenty of people say that um, superheroes, comics are the modern day mythology, and a lot of them follow these archetypes, and movies also follow these archetypes, and it would probably be more prevalent in the comics versus the new movie, because they seem to not go this direction at all, which we'll get into in a moment. Did you want me to pull up the picture that you sent me of the
I think
riddle
that
of the
fits
Sphinx?
perfectly here. Yeah.
So we also have this that we can mention, um, which here are three examples of 3 points of life, which you could also parallel that with the three crones. Um, this is called the riddle of the Sphinx. Brance, do you want to tell us more about it?
Yeah. So I think the riddle of the Sphinx originates in the story of Oedipus. I could be wrong about that, but at any rate, the this person approaches the Sphinx, and it has been basically eating people. Whenever they fail to answer the Sphinx's riddle correctly, it then attacks them and eats them. And so, he engages in conversation with the Sphinx, and the riddle is posed. What what is this? In other words, so what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? And the answer is man or woman in the Crone version. And so here we see Horace the Younger depicted crawling on 4s, then on 2s as an adult, and then on 3s with the aid of a cane in old age. So it would seem that we have the male version um, of this same story kind of encapsulated within the riddle of the Sphinx. But of course, that can be easily analogous to the maiden lady Crone aspects as well. And of course, the Moadib story follows this. Although he kind of enters into the story at age 15, he's kind of already in the middle there. But
Yeah. You also mentioned that the Sphinx is also
it's
oftentimes
oftentimes
depicted with
depicted.
breast.
Yep. Oh, and whenever the riddle is answered, the Sphinx goes crazy and kills itself. So, so that's kind of how that story ends, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the mystery of life,
Yeah.
mystery of aging.
Yeah. So the next archetype is the blind seer, I believe, correct?
Yes, because that pretty much, again, right down here where, oops, like where it's talking about the second sight and all, that is a perfect segue into the blind seer. This one, I think I got to zoom in a little bit. Yeah, okay, that's a little better. And the blind seer, as you notice here on the right, that kind of looks like the Madam Web archetype that they're going for. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
the blind seer is an old archetype. They are blind, and yet they can see more than we can, metaphorically speaking. By using heightened senses, divination, or some type of magical powers to gain knowledge of the world around them. It is a reoccurring theme in mythology. Justice is blind. Odin plucked out an eye to gain knowledge. The gray, the gray, I think that's like the moray. Doesn't give me like a little blurb there. Had only one eye, yeah, the fates. Had only one eye among the 3 of them. Time and again, the sacrifice of sight is shown to result in greater cosmic knowledge. This trope is the reason that being born with a caul, common with the magical 7th son, caul is basically the placenta being stuck on the face or body of the child, is taken as a sign that a child will have seer-like powers. A common version of the legend says that the 7th son of the 7th son will be born with a caul, actually a loose flap of amniotic sac, it says here, over his face, specifically the face. So it's like the veil, to signify seer-like power. A special case of disability superpower, often demonstrated with prophet eyes. Blindfolds are another favorite. So this seems to be a reoccurring trope, as it's explained here.
Yeah. And
So
then
it's the blind seer.
the last trope we have is the Empress in the tarot.
Arguably, I'd say it's both the empress and the high priestess, maybe
Yeah.
representing different ages, but the same character. But yeah, here it
Yes.
is. Would you like me to read about this?
Yeah. You can read a little bit of it. Yes.
I'll zoom it in too because it seems to be a bit smaller. Okay, so the Empress archetype. At its core, the Empress archetype embodies the concept of nurturing and the power of creation. The figure's association with Mother Earth signifies the role of the feminine principle in bringing forth life and abundance. It is a reminder that we are all connected to the nature and have the capacity to give birth to ideas, projects, and relationships. The Empress Tarot card encourages us to embrace our nurturing side and care for ourselves and others with love and compassion. It prompts us to connect with the rhythms of nature and find inspiration in renewing cycles. The card reminds us that creativity flows when we are in harmony with ourselves and the world around us. In a reading, the Empress card often signifies a time of fertility and growth. It may indicate the potential for new beginnings, creative endeavors, or the nurturing of relationships. The card serves as a reminder that we are the creators of our reality, and through love and care, we can manifest abundance in all aspects of life. Of course, there's another portion here that goes into the divine feminine Empress archetype.
I mean, you can read that if you want, but I think what
I
you
think what I
just
read
did
encapsulates
is
the theme.
also, yeah, it encapsulates it perfectly. I'm going to, so we can talk. I'm going to remove our window for a second, and the reason why I had all of those three back to back is, as I mentioned, those are something that is ingrained. Those three archetypes: the blind seer, the Empress Tarot, or the High Priestess, if you will. Thank you for mentioning that one as well, branch, and the Crone, or the Fate. Like, they those three archetypes in particular is what is kind of the foundation of Madam Web, and what we just read. Those are all strong, very powerful, feminine characteristics, archetypes. They're very powerful, very strong, very cool, and it has potential for a cool character, a cool story, and a cool movie. I have all the Sony Venom, Spider-Man list, Spider-Verse um, movies they've done. It's the only one to me that's like actually kind of made sense, because doing a Venom movies, like, yeah, he is an, an one of Spider-Man's most known villains, but he's a villain. How are you going to start with that? But that was all choice for me. And then Morbius, like Morbius, Marvel just created because the vampires was popular in the 90s, but they didn't have the rights for Dracula at the time, so they created Morbius as their stand-in for Dracula. And then, so yeah, he's a villain too. And then later on this year of 2024, they are also releasing another Sony Venomverse movie. They're actually releasing three. They're releasing Madam Web now, and in a few months they're releasing Craven the Hunter, and now at the end of the year they're releasing Venom 3. Um, and so Craven the Hunter, I mean, again, he's just a Spider-Man villain that just hunts, um, has like super strength, super speed, super durability, and he just hunts wild animals and Spider-Man.
So he's like just an animal, but in a man's body kind of thing.
Yeah, he's like the
Yeah, I see
apex.
what you mean.
He wants to be the apex. You know,
He's always in search of a new
yeah,
challenge, huh?
yeah,
He's a big game hunter. Yeah.
yeah. That's actually his background. his origin in the comics was he is just a rich big game hunter, and he is so talented because of his abilities that he gets bored, and he reads a news article that talks about Spider-Man in New York, so he flies to New York to hunt Spider-Man. Yeah, so they're using all these movies, all these characters to make their Spider-Man Spider universe, and it's failing. It feels weird and not planned out. It doesn't seem interesting. It's not really in line to the archetypes. And then they do this Man of Web movie, and you're like, okay, that could not only be a cool character and make a cool movie, but it could also, give some um, legitimacy to a universe of films involving Spider-Man characters. But then they don't even really do the character. They don't do. They don't use the old Crone, the Moray. They don't use the blind seer to that extent. Maybe a little bit because of her abilities, the clairvoyance, um, if anything, and they really don't do um, the powerful Emperor's character because they're they're just trying to do a very bland, strong um, female character that Hollywood likes to do recently. I mean, you mentioned Captain Marvel, Brie Larson. Um, Britt Merling has done a article she wrote in, I believe, in 2019, 2020 for the New York Times called I Don't Want to Play the Strong Female Character. Um, and of course, Britt Merling, um, made The Sound of My Voice, Another Earth, The OA, Murder at the End of the World, and Murder at the End of the World. Um, Actually, the character, the mystery-solving sleuth Darby in it, that was her foil for this strong woman trend in Hollywood that she did the article about, is create a character who is rooted in um, a very um, powerful femininity that isn't um, contradictory. It doesn't hate on its own femininity, like this fourth wave feminism that we see today. Um, and not saying I haven't actually sat through Madam Web, um, but seeing the production around it, seeing the marketing around it, seeing what Sony and Hollywood does, like it's good indication that that's what they're leaning on, and they're not leaning into these pre-established archetypes of the crone, of the blind slayer and the empress or the high priestess, which are very strong feminine characters that you can write a good story for. Is my point. So it's very deliberately going away from these powerful archetypes, saying that what they're doing is to invoke power, but they're not invoking root power of the divine feminine in a way. Um, so that was kind of my inference there. The point that I was kind of weaving around. Um, so I think we're getting close to answering that question you asked at the beginning, Branch.
what the primary distinction then between Captain Marvel and Madam Web, like how they're portrayed.
Yeah, where Captain Marvel seems to be fully into this fourth wave feminist type writing in her, the way that they build up the character,
The
where
unmarried Empress, basically.
where old, yeah, old, or I guess you could say the wild woman, um, and where Madame Web, in at least the comics and the cartoons in her creation, is drawing from these very powerful, very strong, really um, ancient, divine feminine archetypes and
May I
characteristics.
make a observation real quick because you just helped me
Yes.
see this, I think. So I think where they kind of are messing up here is that they're blurring the lines between these archetypes because Brie Larson in the Captain Marvel movie would, you're right, that wild woman thing and being unwed, those are both maiden characteristics. But what they've done is they've combined the maiden and the empress with her character. And I think what they would have been able to do better is start her off younger and show her struggle to become Captain Marvel instead of just starting out automatically the Empress. Well, okay, here's your scepter, here's your power, go do your stuff. And so we don't really get to relate to her because she's not had to really earn it.
Yeah,
So I think
and
if
that's
they
what
had maybe
people's.
focused a little bit on,
Oh, sorry. I was
I was
just
just
gonna
going to
say
add
that's.
that
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's a slight delay there. Sorry. So I think if they had just maybe, because what I'm thinking of is the Wonder Woman 1984, where it shows how she grows up. You know, was really impressive still as a youth, but had to still grow into her own and find that potential that was within her instead of just starting out the gate with it. So I think in that way, the Wonder Woman 1984, which was obviously very much, I mean, the Amazons didn't marry by, that was just their way of life, right? So I mean, you could get more mega female than Wonder Woman 1984, yet they did such a much better job of keeping those compartmentalizations separated. You start the movie out with her as the maiden, then
Yeah,
she becomes the empress. And so I think where they kind of messed up with Captain Marvel was not illustrating that properly. And then with the Madam Web, it looks like they're lingering in the empress and trying to combine it with the crone. um, I think it might have been, even though it might have been a little risky because you lose the sex appeal that we'll be kind of getting into here in a minute. They should have just made her infirm, but maybe shown how it happened or something, and then that way we can kind
yeah,
of relate to the character a little bit better. Um,
yeah. You
uh,
could even jump
when
around in the
instead she's,
timeline
yeah, when
in the
instead what we
movie.
get is a mixture of the two middle and latter archetypes. And so by mixing the two together, they don't do a good job of doing either. And I think
Yeah,
that's kind of a disappointment. But they do
yeah,
include what, three co-stars that she kind of has tagging along with her, and I think
yeah,
in that way they're kind of capturing the maiden aspects when she's the lady or empress, but then we kind of leave out the crone aspect altogether, except we do get the second sight stuff. So I think it's kind of messy when they've.
yeah.
It's like they're clearly supposed to be using these archetypes, but mishandling it somehow. So it almost makes you wonder: is it because the lack of education, like with, they don't have a classical education, and so they don't understand these tropes? I would just be kind of curious in the writing process or the production phase, like how these
Yeah,
errors occur.
yeah. I think it started out with um, in Hollywood deliberately trying to be rebellious as people want to do, and um, go away from these archetypes, and then over time that rebellion just became the norm, and then the people that was getting taught how to write through um, being inspired by the rebellion wasn't looking at what they was the ones that was rebelling against. So now we're on like um, people who are just uneducated, right? So now almost to rebel against the rebellion, you would have to go back and start writing in these traditional, more
In the
ancient
classical
archetypes.
version.
Yeah,
How ironic.
like you'd
Well,
have to start writing classical literature again.
so and that kind of makes me think too, because we'll be ending the show talking about Shakespeare and what that's all about. So again, we would be getting back to the classical tropes, and I think that you're right. It is like an act of rebellion, um, yet they don't even know what they're rebelling against. And over time, like you said, it's become the norm. And so then they want to rebel and then wonder why the movie doesn't do well. So then they want to gripe and complain and blame it on what toxic masculinity or
Yeah,
racism or whatever it might be. It's like, well, you deviated from age old human archetypes, and so what do you expect?
yeah. These archetypes are different than tropes. I mean, the words are seemingly interchangeable, but to me, um, tropes are more modern, right? They're like things that aren't set in stone. For instance, a trope would be like, um,
We said dark academia or
yeah,
whatever.
the dark academia girl, right? Or the dark academia um, um, young boy, or the manic pixie dream girl, or or things like that, where archetypes would be more like what we're talking about with the crone and the empress and all these. Um, so which are innate, and that's what inspires us because they're in nature, they're innated into us. We go through our own hero's journey. That's why Spider-Man um, inspires young boys and young men, right? Um, when I watched the first Spider-Verse movie in theaters for the first time at the premiere years ago, um, and Miles Morales does the leap of faith scene, which in the Spider-Man mythology, it's literally a leap of faith of them being having faith in themselves to be able to swing with web. So in every Spider-Man origin, you always get them on top of the building, leaping off just like just like the full in the tarot, the hero,
Yeah, I was thinking the
and
same thing, dude.
And when I saw that in theaters and he jumps off, I like got up in my seat and was like kind of like stirring around because it like I wanted to like I was so motivated after
You
that. I was
felt
like,
the call
yes,
to
yeah,
adventure.
I felt the goal. And there was like everyone in the theater leaving, like everyone was like so energized, and that's why men seem to be inspired by these heroes and stuff. They want to be like, oh yeah, they want to pick up the sword, right? They feel that call, and it's because they're inspired by these innate archetypes, um, and it seems like when we rebel against them by trying to do like the complete opposite or not do them at all, um, that inspiration is gone. So you're not getting inspired by the story. You're not getting inspired by the myth. getting inspired by the
Well, and
archetype.
think of it this way: um, Thanatos even had to work up to all the stones before he could just snap his fingers and be all powerful and just snap his fingers. Well, he didn't start out that way, you know. So even with his character, there was some development, uh, and even in the end, he still didn't like necessarily succeed, right? Even though he was all powerful.
Yeah,
Um,
and I
and
mean,
he even had some sacrifice, like with his daughter, where to get one of the stones, he had to sacrifice. So he had some character development there, you know. So I just think that
yeah,
is important because if you don't develop the character, you can't attach to them.
yeah. You don't. It's not earned, like you said. Another a good example of this would in the Star Wars fandom, how people don't like Rey
Yeah,
because she's already
exactly.
good with the Force, right? And it's just like, well, she
Don't
doesn't go
force
through
the
the
issue,
hero's
Chris.
journey.
Just let it go.
She doesn't. She doesn't. She doesn't go through the hero's journey. Yeah. So yeah. To get back on track here, what's the next link that we have?
Well, now we're waiting in because of this is our transitional point where we get to kind of expand on. So the crone herself doesn't really possess the sexual appeal, the sexual energies. That's more in the maiden and lady phase where
Yeah, the Empress talking
childbearing
of
occurs. And,
fertility,
yeah.
and yeah,
So we've kind of weaved on the crone stuff, but now we're kind of going to get into, well, what is the actual angle here? They're not really, yeah, it's kind of cool and all to hear about the her predicting the future, this, that, and the other, especially when it's in the same theater with Dune. That's kind of a theme we see going right now, right? You got your female version of the Kwisatz Haderach, so to speak. So, but what the movie seems to be really tapping into, more so than the liminal supernatural aspects, is the age-old sex sells, right? So
yeah.
the next slide we had kind of goes into that, and you can of course
Okay,
expand on
perfect,
that,
perfect,
how
perfect,
sex and
perfect.
advertising is used.
Yeah. So, before we talk about it, did you want to read a little bit of that?
Yeah, and I was just going to preface a little bit that after this little transition here, we're going to get into the reviews of the movie. And really, that's where the meat and potatoes is, so to speak, of why this movie seems to be getting such bad reviews and press, is because this is so overt in the film, um, where it feels like they've kind of cheapened the movie by removing what you were referencing earlier, like some of the really rich archetypal stuff they could have used. They done away with that in favor of sex appeal, sex sells. So yeah, I can read a little bit of this here. Um, okay, and so sex appeal in advertising is a common tactic employed to promote products and services. Research indicates that sexually appealing content, including imagery, is often used to shape or alter the consumer's perception of a brand, even if it's not directly related to the product or service being advertised. A good example of that would be like bikini girls on um, hot
A
rod
beer commercial.
cars. If you buy this car, you'll get a bikini clad chick too. This approach, known as sex sells, has become more prevalent among companies, leading to controversies surrounding the use of sexual campaigns in advertising. Contemporary mainstream advertising across various media platforms, such as magazines, online, and television, frequently incorporates sexual elements to market a wide range of branded goods and services. Provocative images of attractively dressed men and women are commonly used to promote clothing, alcohol, beauty products, and fragrances. Renowned brands like Calvin Klein, Victoria's Secret, and Pepsi use such imagery to cultivate an alluring media presence. I would argue not so much Pepsi, but Coca Cola, because they use that shape of the bottle kind of commercial back in the day, which is the shape of a woman, incidentally.
Oh
So I
yeah,
would
the
argue it's
hourglass
Coke more than
figure.
Pepsi. Yeah. I don't know where they got Pepsi from. Um, and I'll read just a little bit more here since there's just a tad bit more. In some cases, sexual content is overtly displayed, which is what we're going to be talking about here, while in others it is subtly integrated with imperceptible cues aimed at influencing the target audience, which is probably what they intended with this. I think they overshot it though. Furthermore, sexual content has been employed to promote mainstream products that were not traditionally associated with sex. For instance, a good example of that would be comic books. For instance, the Dallas Opera's marketing of more suggestive aspects of its performances is believed to have contributed to a boost in ticket sales. The effectiveness of sex appeal in advertising varies depending on the cultural context and the gender of the recipient. Though these aspects are subject to further research and discussion, the thing that comes to mind, Titanic with Leonardo DiCaprio, or The Notebook with Ryan Gosling, or something like that. So
Yeah.
that I think that's another good example, which is more romantic and less um lusty, but still in the same vein, I think.
Yeah, lusty. If you want to lusty examples, you could get like Channing Tatum from like the Step Up movies to the Magic Mike movies,
There you
or
go.
yeah, or even
Because
Dakota
see,
Johnson.
well, I was just going to say, even a movie like Pretty Woman, which is quite overt in some ways, because I mean, the lady is a prostitute after all, but yet it doesn't really. It still comes off as more romantic, though. You know, so I think
Yeah,
in days past, they somehow managed to do it more tastefully, in some cases at least, as opposed to where I think they've kind of gotten lazy and less disciplined. Because it made me think of that part here where it's saying overtly or subtly. It's like it's no longer subtle; it's more overt. Anyway, did you have anything to add, or would you
no,
like me to read more?
not on this. I mean, you can read more if you want, or we can go on.
Well, this dovetails with the next one,
Yeah, which is
which is
exploitation
exploitation. So,
films. And a little
and
bit of
this is kind
history
of
on.
where Madam Web is just made to be a B movie. That's probably
Yeah. So a
accurate.
little bit of before you read it, I'll give a little bit of um, history on exploitation films myself, um, and that is exploitation films kind of started with the drive-in films because they would need films to be played at the drive-in. So you would get like indie films, lower budget um, movie makers um, try to make a name for themselves and do what they enjoy and and sell their movies to the drive-ins. Well, the drive-ins and the people that they're selling to, they need um, they need a get right. They need a selling point. And so an easy one would be exploiting something, whether it's gore or, um, in this case, sex. Um,
And may
and
I interject
so,
one moment? Um,
yeah,
we were talking before the show, and I've never really been into gore movies and horror, but I did notice that The Purge was available to watch on Netflix or something. So I forced myself to sit through it just so I could appreciate why it was so popular. And there was more to it than I originally thought, but they did have this obsession with violence. And then I couldn't even watch the next one because it was just so over the top with the gore and the violence. And so this is also an example of exploitation, but from a different perspective, right? With the violence and
yeah,
such.
yeah. And then there was also race, like you have the black exploitation,
Oh, that
right?
was actually very prevalent in the Purge movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and things like that. So yeah, exploitation films, and not all of them are bad. There are some in the heyday of um, the drive-in films. There were some interesting things being done with exploitation films. There was, a sandbox of creativity alongside of it. And now it's become more and more mainstream to a point. For instance, an exploitation film that we've talked about on this channel is Society. When we did the first deep dive in, we talked about Society and Eyes Wide Shut. Society is known as an exploitation film. Um,
Definitely got
and
that beat movie feel to it too.
yeah, and B movies was just what exploitation films got known as um, after the years. The terminology um, evolves and everything. So they went from exploitation films to B movies. Um, so yeah, so that's a little bit of history that I know. Do you want to read a little bit of this?
Well, and it just in that vein there, you mentioned the drive-in. So it talks about the B movie as a type of low-budget commercial motion picture originally during the golden age of Hollywood. This term specifically referred to films meant to be shown as a lesser-known second half of a double feature,
Yeah,
somewhat similar to B-sides in the world of recorded music. So I would say that's also similar to like when a known band has somebody open for them. Of course, that's like in a reverse order, but it's a lesser known B list band, right?
yeah,
So here you have B list actors, and maybe they're trying to get their name out there. A lot of times when you do research on an actor or an actress, you'll find that they're in a bunch of stuff that you didn't even know about. Uh, but that was before they became famous, right? So they might find themselves in some B movie type roles, right?
yeah. You used to be able to like work your way up that ladder of the industry back in the golden age. And again, that's how we came up with the deep drive-in segments of King of Cups.
Yeah.
Is and why it's called the deep drive-in. We're esoterically comparing and contrasting and discussing two similar theme movies, um, but they are two different movies. Just like you would watch two similar movies at a back to back at a drive-in. Yeah.
So it's kind of like hyperbolic in a sense, then. So they want to exaggerate the thing that they're focusing on so that it has that almost like a slapstick shock quality to it. Um,
Yeah,
oh, look at
it's
the drug
making
use. Oh, look at the violence. Oh, look at the sex. And I can kind of see how these themselves have morphed into tropes that it's like you mentioned a really great example. I think of this would be this the was it the Scream movies? I mean, those are
oh yeah.
like a series of B movies in of themselves that kind of hyper fixate on violence, right?
Yes, the Scream movie that uh, Scream movies are interesting in that sense because Wes Craven, the director, he um, he had directed movies, for decades prior, and he kind of um, through directing all these different types of horror movies, he kind of became, in a way, the godfather of the modern horror slasher, whatever you want to call it, at the time. So by the time the '90s came, everyone was just making movies like him, and the ones that he came up with, right? All the other directors that came up alongside him. And so when the '90s came, he made Scream as a kind of self reflection of what he had helped establish throughout the 70s and 80s. Um, so that's why Scream is so interesting to me, because it's like exploitation, like a higher budget exploitation. It's like a spoof, but taken seriously, or he's like through the lens of this, you know, the roles of horror films that I have helped establish over the last 2 decades. I am going to be analyzing those archetypes and those tropes, and how have those archetypes and tropes affected the viewers, right?
Yeah.
Of these kids that go see it and stuff. And but through a very earnest, very sincere way, where it's not kind of not making it the butt of the joke, like other spoofs and exploitation things may do. Yeah, so yeah, that is an example. Where now
So
it's different. Yeah.
So I think, see, I wasn't able to understand this till just now when you did that explanation and we visited this topic. So it's easy to see how and why movie theater culture is the way it is, because and why and how how the entertainment aspects of this differ from the cinematic aspects. So you have a director that's very well known that actually embraces these archetypes and casts for them appropriately and actually knows what they're doing. They're
Yes.
producing cinema, which is art, and that's why they get the awards, is because they're telling stories in a way that it works. Whereas what we really have today is grindhouse, where it started out as drive-ins, and they're just grinding out these movies to simply to sell tickets. And so what we have today seems like the producers have never changed the way they do business. They're still just grinding out the movies and putting the slop down for us to eat. And it seems like the cinema that we get from time to time is actually not the intended product of Hollywood. So it seems like we're lucky to ever get a Hollywood masterpiece today, because that's really not what they want to produce. That's not what sells. It's not grindhouse. So
Exactly. It's
I
not.
find that provocative.
Yeah, exactly. That's why Sony is on top of Madam Web. They're releasing 2 other Sony verse movies, The Craven and Venom 3, and it's like, maybe instead of releasing 3 movies this year in your franchise, in your Sonyverse, if you just made one and gave it a good script,
Right? You wouldn't need 3,
then
but it would make less money then too.
yeah,
Well, arguably, maybe not.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it makes me think too, like who the producers choose as a director is probably another big decision that factors into this. Like, for instance, if I were the producer of Madam Web and I actually wanted to tell the story and do character development, well, I might choose, I mean, I don't know, directors, you could probably give a better example, but you would choose a Spielberg or um, I don't know, some other big name director, and they would explore the character and what are the thoughts in their head and how are they molded and all this. Where instead it's like we get some entertainment director, they just grind it out like the meat grinder. And what we
yeah,
get on the other end, the hamburger that we get on the other end, is this movie.
yeah, exactly. Is there anything you wanted to read from this?
Not really, but I just think it's kind of funny how in this way,
Oh yeah,
it's
there's
in
a
the same
classic,
bucket.
Reefer Madness.
I was just about to say it's in the same bucket with movies like Reefer Madness, Sex Madness, just all these like very tropey type sounding movies. And so, maybe one day Madam Web will have a cult following, right? because after all, some of these movies get really weird. Even up here at the top, it kind of mentioned cult movies. Yeah, a lot of times they'll gain
Yeah,
cult followings. So maybe they're hoping that one day Sony will develop a cult following like Marvel has already. But I don't think that's
maybe.
going to happen because they're not embracing what's relatable, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Um, and I don't know if you have the link up actually, but maybe this is a good time to um, mention um, that they are using memes to sell movies. Um,
Well, that's
because
actually not a bad idea, but I
they
guess it depends on the meme.
well, what I mean by that is they don't care if it's good or bad. They're using like, oh, if there is a meme, well, Gen Z will see a meme probably faster than they see a trailer to a movie. Um, so and they don't care if it's good or bad. They just want to see the meme of it, right? Um, so, for instance, the meme of there was a meme that came out when the Venom movie dropped. Um, when Venom says the word turd in the movie, it's like you're just a turd in the wind. It's like that's literally a
Is bad
line.
publicity, they say.
Yeah, and that became a meme because that can't believe that's a real line in the movie, and it was. Um, and then in the Morbius movie, it's Morbin time became a meme, and so much so that they put Morbius back into theaters because people wanted to relish in the meme more. Um, and
Well,
or
that's
the mini. Uh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's one way to market your movie, I
Yeah.
guess.
Um, or the Minions movie that came out. They had a meme of it where um, Gen Z people, would dress up in like prom suits and go see the Minions, the Rise of Gru, and throw bananas at the screen. Um, and the theaters
Ugh.
had to stop, like issue statements and stop letting people in um, if they had signs that they was going to do that meme and then record it and post it online because that's disruptive, right? Um, but the studios don't care because
It's not their theater.
yeah, publicity is publicity. They're still selling the ticket. They don't care if it's good or bad. They don't care if you watch it. The algorithm doesn't care if you hate watch something or if you enjoy something, or all the algorithm sees is you click on the video, right? Um, so it's that whole mindset. Any publicity works. Um, so they don't care if Madam Web um, does poor, but if they can get a meme going of it, a meme marketing, some mimetic magic marketing, um, and then they could, then that means they're selling tickets and they're making money, and that's all that
I just thought
matters.
of something funny. I couldn't help but think of Rocky. I'm sorry, there's a delay, unfortunately, so I keep interrupting you. So I couldn't help but think of Rocky Horror Picture Show when you were talking because of all the antics and nonsense that people. That's a cult classic B movie. So yeah, I guess that's something that the producers. I doubt anybody knows that's going to happen when they're producing the movie.
Well, it used
But
to
one
be
other
that
thing I thought
way.
of that I thought was kind of funny was imagine imagine Sony taking a direction like this too, where maybe they take the lead from Disney, Sony, MCU movies, how ridiculous that might get, like, how, like, what is it, Elsa and Frozen, such a meme. We're in the subway and she starts eyes or some stupid thing like that. I'm
Yeah.
surprised they don't
Yeah.
do that. Like, we
Yeah.
have My Chemical Romance singing the lead track, and Madam Web's like acting it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be people couldn't predict what was going to be memes or what were trend, but now, um, it seems like Hollywood and Sony feel like they can predict what will be memes and they can re-replicate memes. Like they have the meme template, and so they're trying to make meme-worthy moments. So they will get their movie trailer, their poster, the movie to trend that way. So memes have become like part of the marketing instead of the aftermath.
It's free grassroots marketing too, which money can't buy.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So this next thing that you have pulled up here, um, yeah, Dakota Johnson herself, um, in all her promotional interviews and stuff circuit that she's going through, she's also just um, gave the movie bad reviews, bad rep. So, um, is there anything you wanted to read from this branch?
It it's one of those articles where I'm not a member of their site or whatever, so
Okay. Okay, well, this one wasn't
it's
really
not
that
actually going to let me
important.
read anything.
Yeah. You can
But
move
I
on to
think
the
the
next
next
one. But
one's
yeah,
pretty much the
Dakota
same thing.
Johnson is, yeah. Dakota Johnson, yeah,
And this one actually does let you read a
is
little bit. So is this pretty much the same thing?
minor. Yeah, where they're trying to like
Sounds
Dakota
like it.
Johnson is saying it's a bad movie, and even the promotional stuff, they're acting like it's a bad movie. They're wanting people to watch it as if it's a bad movie instead of just making a good movie.
So they want you to hate
Yeah,
watch it.
so, yeah,
Man, that's pretty weird tactic to use these days. It's like trying to. It's like getting a one of those cards where every time you eat the sub, you get a hole punched, but actually the subs are crappy, but you still feel compelled to fill up that card. And that's kind of how this feels. It's like, well, it's another one of the MCU Sony things, so you don't want to leave your Beanie Baby collection unfulfilled. You gotta catch them all, as the
yeah,
Pokemon slogan says. um, so you almost like peer pressured into it in a way too, because all your friends are going to see it just because you may very well tag along as well. So I can kind of see the morbid marketing trend there. So we can read this article because it kind of captures that, I think. The funny thing about watching audiences cool off from big budget comic book adaptations in recent years is how, if you lived through the very early aughts, which I guess the 2000s, it almost feels like things are going back to the way they used to be. After years of Marvel tentpoles dominating the box office, it's been easy to forget how unabashedly unserious these kinds of projects usually were outside the handful that put the genre on the map. So I guess they're saying we're going back to a hokey, humble beginnings, huh? But
Yeah,
before the rise of the MCU, bad comic book movies, projects that didn't take themselves or their source material at all seriously, were generally the rule rather than the exception. And while they might not have been great, they were the sort of films audiences knew how to have fun with. Okay, this is funny that it's like we know it's bad, guys, but we're actually getting back to our roots. We can't help it that there's been a lot of good Marvel movies made that have broken the mold.
yeah.
We're getting
They're like, yeah,
OG.
this is like Daredevil or the Elektra movie or the Catwoman movie from the early 2000s. It's bad, but you're gonna have fun watching it. Come on now, this is our roots. You remember the good times of bad comic book adaptations?
So I guess they make a valid point here. Maybe we've just kind of gotten spoiled with all the high budget film production. But before the rise of MCU, bad comic book movies projects that didn't. Oh, sorry, I already read that part.
Yeah.
It is only since multiverse became the hot new thing in Hollywood that the studios have gotten comfortable even with acknowledging and capitalizing on people's nostalgia. Ah, that's it. Nostalgia drip. Those
Yeah.
halcyon days when Spider Man's webbing was organic. But unlike some of Sony's other recent Spider Man features, which have been more focused on bringing specific characters and actors back from the past franchises, director S.J. Clarkson's Madam Web is far more interested in revisiting a specific moment in comic book movie history, one defined by iffy costumes, perplexing plots, and a palpable sense of on screen embarrassment. Ooh, is that cringe that they're talking about? There's a German word for that called Schadenfreude. I don't know. It's like shared embarrassment or something like that.
Yeah, even
Like when you
yeah,
want to just
a lot of
pull
the
up.
critics were saying that the actresses, Dakota Johnson herself, is phoning it in. They're not even trying, and then they're also saying that the script is unnatural. The dialogue is not human speak. It's just very poorly written exposition being read in a monotone, emotionless, static way that is
Oh, so
confusing
apparently
sometimes.
she dies in the film, but awakens to find herself imbued with ill-defined set of precognitive powers. So I guess that's when she enters into her Crone phase, is when she dies and is reborn. So I guess at least they're making the
So
attempt
she has
there.
a near-death experience.
Yeah, and then she gets her posse of, um, um, you know, acolytes. um, we have several more links, so if you like, I can
Yeah, he can move on to the
go
next
to
one.
a different one. There's quite a few here about the map web movie.
Yeah, I just
Okay,
was
and
trying to show that it's not just one or two
oh,
people.
that
It's
word
it's
there's that word
embarrassing.
embarrassing again.
Yeah.
So a superhero movie is in trouble when even the first reactions, quote, from fan sites are scathing. Now the critic reviews for Marvel and Sony's Madam Web have been revealed, and the write-ups are pretty devastating for the Spider-Man spinoff. Madam Web is
I like how
directed
they're saying a
by
spin-off when there's never been a Spider-Man in their universe yet.
exactly because they're riding the coattails of that franchise.
Yeah.
Um, And says here Johnson escapes most of the criticism, but everything else is getting skewered as the latest example of superhero movie fatigue meeting a genuinely disappointing film. Madam Web, which falls under the Sony umbrella, arrives just 2 months after The Marvels became the lowest grossing Marvel Cinematic Universe title of all time, earning just $206 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but when you consider the production costs, they actually don't gross much. If the
Yeah.
below reviews of Madam Web are any indication, it may open even lower than The Marvels, which hailed from Disney's Marvel Studio. So, yeah, when I mentioned The Marvels earlier, it's kind of like becoming a trend. It's like they really are embracing the B movie cringe, I guess. It's like, well, how can we make, how bad can we make a movie?
And get people to still watch it.
That's a race to the
Yeah.
bottom, if you ask me. That's not
Yeah.
going to bode well.
And even Dakota Johnson herself said it was, for her, it was hard to act in front of a blue screen um, for the majority of the time. And like, so that's up to the director, since they're just in front of a blue screen with no props or setting to act off of. It gives the director even more responsibility to direct, even more so the actor or actress in the right direction. So that's failure, even more failure on their part.
Here's kind
And
of a
that's,
short and concise review. A
yeah,
new low for superhero debacles. At least Catwoman and Batman and Robin believed in what they were doing. They were wrong, but Madam Web just feels like a cynical copy of the bare minimum to qualify as a comic book movie. That hurts. I hurt reading it. So again, kind of like we were saying, it's riding the coattails of a franchise. Um, I mean, they might have been better off just creating an entirely new thing rather than trying to rip something off.
yeah,
I think they could solve this problem pretty easily too, Chris, by if they really don't want to take themselves seriously and they want it to have that B movie kind of feel, why do they then waste their budget on hiring in these expensive actors and actresses? Why not let upcoming? I mean, I do understand there are some younger stars in this. You said there are some millennial actresses, and so I do
yeah.
appreciate
Some
that.
Gen
But
Z
it seems like,
actresses.
but it just seems like why not fully recruit your staff from that talent pool if you really wanted to have that type of feel to it, then you're going to
Well,
probably get that too more authentically with no name actors that you don't have to pay an arm and a leg for.
yeah.
Um,
Some good examples of that. Again, let's go back to Lisa Frankenstein for a moment. Um, Lisa Frankenstein drew inspiration from um, a lot of campy movies and the whole like campy rom-coms and the cheesy 90s and 80s movies, or more specifically 80s, um, like your Weird Sciences and whatnot. And um, and people enjoyed it because it was like again, just like I was saying with the Scream movies, the the archetypes and the themes and the style of directing and cinematography was understood well enough to make it more of a honoring of all of that what came before. Yeah. To
and I feel like
now let's
this really drives the point home too that we were making earlier about the sex stuff. Here's one of the public appearances for the lead actress, and she's literally naked.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, there's I've seen multiple memes of like people going like, "Oh yeah, critics right now and movie reviewer or influencers are like, oh yeah, My Web is a bad movie." Meanwhile, Sony keeps on posting um paid articles of, "Oh, but look at their dresses. Oh, look at them, basically naked."
And it's the same strategy they employed for the Eternals, right? They sent their acting staff on a world tour to just promote the movie instead of just letting the movie itself be the promotion. I mean, if it's good, people are going to tell their friends. They might want to go see it a second time. It's going to get good reviews. But instead, it's like, we're just going to use the actresses and actors as a, you know, means to advertise the movie and promote the movie. And I think that's a
Yeah,
folly. Now, some of these women are not necessarily dressed quite the same way,
yeah.
but the lead
The
actress
the
definitely
yeah
is.
the lead are, yeah. And I think it's funny that one of the sponsors you see is Synchrony, which I don't know what that is. But it's close to synchronicity, which could be tied to the themes of clairvoyance, fate.
And they do have some men in this. I was totally unaware of the fact there was some men in it, so they're not totally uh, abandoning them. but
Um,
but yeah, she's the only one that's dressed like this. Now there was a woman at the top that was still dressed kind of revealing, like, but
yeah,
it wasn't
yeah. The
it
one
wasn't
that
quite
they're
the
really
same.
focusing on
So
though is
I think. Do you
Dakota
think they were
Johnson.
told to do this? Which I mean, dude, everything's there. Like, there's nothing left to the imagination. She may as well be naked. There's
Yeah.
no point in her even having that. That's not even a dress. That's not even. I mean, that's not even. She's wearing a fishing net, is what she's wearing. But anyway, so this is
Just
kind of
catfishing.
circling back to what we were saying earlier. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so they're using the sex thing to sell. So if they were really trying to cast this lead character properly, shouldn't they have chosen an old? And maybe this would have been the only person in the entire movie that was unknown. Okay, fine. If you want your lead actress to be somewhat famous, fine. But they could have chosen an older actress
Yeah.
with
And
some acting
the
experience and maybe was a little bit older. And even if you wanted her to have that sex appeal still, they could have chose somebody like Angelina Jolie, for instance, who still had that feminine mystique kind of thing, but is actually older. And
yeah.
she's an
Well,
actor, action
Dakota Johnson,
actress.
she's a millennial, so she's younger, but she is older than the other three, who are Gen Z. So
But
they,
still, I think that they kind of missed the mark. Like, maybe they should have balanced it out a little bit by having like a young,
yeah,
a middle, and they're just missing the old. They're missing the crone.
yeah, exactly.
So I guess just off the top of your head, can you think of who might have been good for that to fill in that gap? Like if they were to cast a crone in this, how they could have maybe
Um,
added some balance.
yeah, I think I I probably would have tried to get someone. I would probably try to get someone. The youngest would probably be 60, probably between like,
I think that's about right.
yeah, probably between the age of like probably 60 to maybe 70s would be what I would be looking for if I was, directing or even just the casting director of the movie. But they deliberately went younger for this one.
And I have the actress in my head, but I can't remember who it is. And she does kind of have like the old. I can imagine her having like the 50s style kind of curled up hair with some glasses on.
What
What
It's also like
you know
how with every Spider-Man movie, Aunt May gets younger.
right? They can want her to be more attractive when she should be getting older. But they
Yeah,
really should have cast a spinster to be Madam Web, an older woman that's unmarried or whatever. That I think that would have fit so much better. Oh, who would have been perfect? Maybe not perfect, but definitely getting closer to the mark. That Fleetwood Mac lady.
Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, she would have even been better. I mean, she sometimes makes appearances in film. She probably would have made an excellent Madam Web. And you could have kept Dakota in the mix, and just made her like the middle empress, but then had Stevie be like the Madam Web.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just my 2 cents there.
That is a very interesting idea. But it's crazy.
I'm thinking how much that would have changed the movie.
Oh, it would have given it a whole different vibe.
How much that might have changed the vibe. Yeah, you'd have more of a mystical. And just another.
Yeah. So this is questioning: is it purposely bad? Which I think it is.
But here's the thing, though, Chris. If you were going to produce a movie that you knew would be bad and you were planning for it to be bad, then why did it not just get canned like the Roadrunner movie in Warner Brothers?
That's the question. I've heard people say, I bet they wish that Madam Web was made by Warner Brothers, because then it would have
they would have just shelved it and did it at a tax write-off. Now, wasn't there a female actress that was kind of struggling with that herself, where the movie?
Yeah, it was the girl that played. They made a Batgirl movie.
Okay, so there
you go. They shelved it. Yeah, and she also I think she's the one that got injured, if I remember correctly, during a stunt.
Now, was that movie? I mean, we never got to see it, I guess, but it wasn't probably made to be bad, though, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of ironic how a movie like that gets produced and never sees the light of day, and then this gets promoted, and it's like they made it bad on purpose.
Yeah. If you want to read this one, you can, or if you want to skip over it since we've read a couple already.
I'll read the first paragraph because I like to kind of give a taste of what each link is about. It might be time to reassess Sony's Spider-Man universe. The universe, as you will be aware, exists thanks to the deal that Sony made with Marvel to get Spider-Man back into the MCU. Basically, the deal means that Marvel can make Spider-Man movies for Sony, and Sony can make Spider-Man movies for Sony. But none of Sony's Spider-Man films can have Spider-Man in them. Makes sense? Which is what we were talking about earlier, a Spider-Man-less universe. It's like a spider web with no center of the web. It's kind of strange how they did that. So I wonder if maybe after a renegotiation, things would maybe change a little bit.
Yeah, that's crazy to really think about it.
And then this article, Dakota Johnson and her refreshing, honest Madam Web interviews. Why people love stars going, quote, off script.
This is a reference to her talking about how bad the movie is. Like, at least she owns it, and she's not pretending to say this movie is good, knowing that it's bad.
So this would be like late night shows where she's going on to promote the movie and stuff.
Yeah,
a good example of that. So she's been making her rounds then with the late night hosts.
Yeah,
I see. Kind of hard to follow up on the heels of something like Oppenheimer. I would almost put this in the same camp as Barbie then. So would you like me to read any of this?
Only if you want to.
There's a nice part here, flop tactics. Maybe this will kind of get to the point.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can get away with if you have a quick wit and endearingly grumpy persona. Take Michael Shannon. He played the villainous General Zod in 2013's Man of Steel. By the way, can you hear Cher playing in the background? Apparently somebody's downstairs playing Cher really loud.
Oh no, I can't hear
You cannot
anything.
hear it? Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Okay.
Thank you for
But
sharing.
when he was asked whether Superman would triumph over Batman in the sequel, Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, he deadpanned. I'm so utterly unconcerned with the outcome of that fight, so profoundly, utterly unconcerned. I can't even come up with a fake answer. End quote. This exquisite response was perfect in keeping with Shannon's image of as an intimidating indie thespian, and it didn't stop him from playing General Zod again in The Flash. One factor that the Man of Steel had its detractors anyway, so Shannon wasn't being too controversial by maligning the franchise. Similarly, Johnson's wry press appearances looked to set much of the more sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. Looked set to be much more appreciated than Madam Web itself, giving the bad reviews and low box office tracking that the film had experienced ahead of its release. Indeed, if you're in a film that has flopped, throwing it under the bus can be a shrewd way to salvage your own reputation. When the exorable Catwoman, to which Madam Web has been compared, won 4 Golden Raspberries or Razzies, never even heard of that award, including one for
Razzies,
worst.
yeah, Razzies are it's like the opposite of the awards show. It's like they give awards to the worst movies of the year.
I
They
see.
razz you about it and give you a Razzie.
So they're sorry, somebody's sneezing now. Apparently, okay. So they're really trying to get the worst award. That's man. The strategy here is, I mean, when you're dealing with that much money, you'd think they would be striving for success. But it's like, hey, here's several million dollars. Please lower the bar as much as possible. It's like, I don't understand what is the. So yeah, it just kind of goes on and on here. I mean, I feel like at some
Yeah.
point
Yeah,
it's redundant.
you can get to the next one. I didn't know how many we need to drive our point home, so I sent you a bunch.
I mean, the fact that there's so many is enough, and they're all dated this not Thanksgiving, but Valentine's week. We got Dakota Johnson and Cindy Sweeney can't save the tangled mess of Madam Web. So I'll just read a little bit from this one. I genuinely wish I had better news about this latest Marvel project, but being a film about its lead character being unable to see into the future, you would think that Madam Web knew this was coming. First, let's make one thing clear. Madam Web does not take place in the ever-expanding MCU that the majority of its projects reside in, but is somewhat in its own standalone story within the Sony Spider-Man universe. Kind of reminds me of WandaVision, I guess, in that regard. Starring Dakota Johnson as Cassandra Webb. The film actually starts off rather strong. Cassie is a New York City paramedic in 2003, a time when 9/11 still felt fresh, and America's patriotism towards first responders was at an all-time high. Unlike most larger-than-life Marvel films that have come before it, Madam Web begins refreshingly different, with a much more grounded story to it. When first introducing the audience to Cassie's ordinary world, since 9/11 came up in that, can you please repeat a little bit of what you were telling me earlier that we would have never had? And this will, of course, explain why it's so strange that they cast who they cast, because you're going to actually explain it, I think. This is when everything's going to start to make sense, I think, for people that are listening.
Yeah. So we wouldn't have got 50 Shades of Grey, most likely, if it wasn't for 9/11 happening. And the reason there is it said that Gerard Way, the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, was inspired to form My Chemical Romance after seeing 9/11, the events of 9/11. And then the band My Chemical Romance inspired Stephanie Meyer to write Twilight. Twilight inspired, I forget the author's name, to write 50 Shades of Grey, which started out allegedly. I mean, I haven't read them. I don't read. It's not my sort of thing. But allegedly started out as a fan fiction of Twilight, and of course, Dakota Johnson got her claim to fame in cinema. Her cinema rite of passage was in the film 50 Shades of Grey. Of course, she's a Nepo baby, and we're going to get into all of that in a moment. But yeah, that is all. Everything starts kind of. The webs are starting to connect. You're seeing what the webs are, strands are working together here.
But here's the thing that I think is so strange is it's saying down here in the article, just as Cassie is a guardian angel type, Johnson herself has become a, quote, big sister to Sweeney, Merced, and O'Connor, her co-stars said. So, in other words, our role model is 50 Shades of Grey star Dakota Johnson, right? That's another way of saying that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And so here she's actually, this is titled, Dakota Johnson hasn't watched Madam Web, pokes fun at Gen Z co-stars. So here you have this 50 Shades of Grey, I'm naked on the runway promoting the movie, but I'm big sis to these kids that I'm acting with. And I think that's kind of weird. Like, imagine if just to kind of make the point, I think that there was probably a male lead in 50 Shades of Grey as well, right? Because it's like about a therapist and her client or something weird like that.
Yeah.
So how much weirder would it have been? Of course, I know that it's Madam Web, but imagine gender swapping for a second. Let's say that Madam Web's played by the male lead of 50 Shades of Grey, and he considered himself the big brother to these three co-star girls. Wouldn't that seem a little bit weird? I think so, right? But because it's a woman, it's okay. I don't personally, I think that's kind of weird. So it just seems like they could have avoided a lot of this by choosing an entirely different star. But it's like they played into that. So it's like, are you hoping that the same people that liked 50 Shades of Grey are going to come and see Madam Web? But if your target audience for Madam Web is actually teenagers and young 20-year-old couples going to the movies during Valentine's Day, like, it's kind of getting into, like, I feel kind of ucky about it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, here's this article, another scathing review, except this one's more from her perspective, where, like they said, throwing your project under the bus might be a way of salvaging your own reputation. So maybe she's trying to do that here.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then there's
next one.
This is a different article. Dakota Johnson's new Madam Web movie is awful, but her Gucci premiere dress is perfection. So there you go about the dress deflection. Oh, look, she's naked on the runway. Of course, we've already shown the dress, so you can't see it here. Yeah. But it's just funny. It's like, don't look over here. Look over here.
Yeah.
Which, again, are you familiar with the character from the comic books of Madam Web? Like, was she even seductive in the very least? Was that even an
No,
aspect or an attribute
she
of
was
hers?
always that elderly, wise woman that would, help Peter when he needed help, would give him advice. She was at the center of all the Spider-Verse stuff because she, had her clairvoyance, and that's
Well, the
kind of
only
her
way I can
duty.
see Spider-Man going to her for advice is if he had some girlfriend that was into bondage and he's using the spider webs. He's like, "Hey, Madam Web, I need some tips from 50 Shades of Grey lady here." You see
Exactly.
what I mean? Like, it's too distracting, I think.
I mean, even Madame Web was even modeled after Stan Lee's wife, and she in the in the '90s cartoon, she was even voiced by Stan Lee's wife. So
And
there was
he's
a lot of
now passed away, right?
yeah, they both passed away.
So I would wonder how he would have felt about this portrayal of his wife, essentially. I mean, you know what I mean? That's what it boils down to.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And so we can go ahead and go to the next because this is just talking about her dress.
yeah.
I can imagine that author
Oh,
was probably paid handsomely for that review.
yeah. Nepo
Oh, that would be
baby.
called a fluff piece, right?
Yeah, a fluff piece. Nepo baby of of the week. Everyone's wrong about Dakota Johnson's Madam Web tour.
And see, even this picture is kind of subconsciously look, she's naked in that dress in a baby carriage. So here you have, like, again, the crawling child on 4 legs, but then the empress on 2 legs. They're blending those two things together. And then her precognition powers being the Crone aspect. So it's like a muddled
Yeah,
archetype here. I just think it's so
well, the difference
strange.
between the Wild Woman and the Divine Mother is um, the
Well, you can't
you
be a
know
mother if you're single. So, and the wild woman
yeah
is an unwed maiden, like
yeah
Artemis, cannot be tamed, is not wed.
she's yeah and well a good um, element of that is I'm not a prude in any way, but in that archetype the difference is the chastity, right?
Exactly.
Is
Which,
the
yeah.
Wild Woman doesn't mess around in the sheets because she doesn't want to give up the power of being the wild woman, of being the strong, independent woman. Where the divine, when she gives that up, she's accepting the the role of the divine mother and the
A
power.
maturation has
Yeah,
occurred in a sense, a fulfilling of purpose
yeah.
in a way.
The
And see,
and
they could have tapped into that a little more had one of these co-stars of hers, who are all younger, if one of them had been her own daughter, that could have been a really easy way to strengthen the mother archetype that she's trying to fulfill, or it seems
yeah.
like they're trying to fulfill.
And the divine mother is almost another lost archetype. The divine mother is a very powerful feminine character or archetype.
Shall we move on to the next, or was there anything in this article in particular that you wanted to focus on?
Um, no, I think that one. Um, this talks about her again and everything, and so we can just go on from it.
Well, perhaps you can expand just a tad then on the Nepo baby thing, because you
That
seem
could
to
also
understand that a little
be
more than I do.
yeah that could that can go along with the next link. Because the next link should have the names of her parents somewhere on it.
And it looks like this here is damage control. Johnson
Yeah.
might be best known as Hollywood's don't give a fuck queen, but tales of her, quote, hating Madam Web have been vastly exaggerated. So, yeah, that sounds like damage control from the agents and producers.
Yeah.
Because if, after all, if your lead star is going around talking about it in a negative light, that's definitely not helping to sell tickets, probably. And I'd say that's why they got such a tight leash on her too, because some of the things I've seen her doing, like with late night talk show hosts and stuff, she's really not allowed to talk about the movie. She like talk about her experience filming it and stuff, but like they really didn't want her spoiling it in any way, I guess. And maybe this is kind of connected to the fact that like we know it's bad. Please don't talk about it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And
So yeah,
we can move to the next one.
yeah. So the next one is just her IMDb page, which on it should let us know her parents' names. But her parents are also famous, which is where the nepotism comes in. Because nepo babies just mean, people in the industry that was born into the industry because their parents were famous. Their parents was already
Speaking of
part of the
born,
industry. Yeah.
she is a Libra. So honestly, I'm surprised she's not a Scorpio with the way that she's playing into the whole sex thing. But, Libra's pretty
Yeah.
close. So maybe she has another planet in Scorpio. Dakota Mai Johnson is an American actress and fashion model. She was born in Austin, Texas, and is the daughter of actors Don Johnson and Melanie Griffith. Are you kidding me? Isn't Don Johnson? I can't remember who that is, actually. That sounds very familiar. Um, Her maternal grandmother is actress Tippi Hedren. In 1999, she made her film debut in Crazy in Alabama, 1999, where she and her half
Yeah.
sister, Stella Stella, played the daughters to their real life mother, Melanie Griffith. See, right there, mother daughter connection.
Yeah.
Maybe her mom would have been a better Madam Web. The film was directed by her stepfather, Antonio Banderas. Well, how funny. But it wasn't a hit. Dakota resumed her schooling and waited several years to reemerge as Madam Web. Well,
Yeah. The movie that
50
got
Shades of Grey
her
stuff.
attention, got her to the limelight was, of course, 50 Shades of Grey. If you scroll down, I'm sure it'll list 50 Shades of Grey as well.
Sorry, I axed it.
Yeah, I know you're fine. It wasn't important, but yeah, we all know that she's in the movie. And then the big Gen Z actress, who I guess is fairly new since Gen Z are the younger generation, is Cindy Sweeney, and I really don't know much about her. I know that she's got a lot of fanboys. It seems like.
She is quite beautiful. It
To,
says here that she's born September 12th, so she's a Virgo, and being one of the younger cohorts of Madam Web, Virgo, the Virgin, does fit that at least.
yeah, she plays one of the Spider Woman, and they I couldn't verify it, but there is a news story going around that could be true, could not be true, of a guy going to a screening for the Man and Web movie and doing some inappropriate things to himself because Sydney
Oh,
Sweeney
yes.
is in the
Heard about
movie.
this.
Yeah.
Oh, it's because of her? It wasn't the lead, huh? I thought it was because of Dakota. Well,
Possibly
that's kind
also
of
because
weird.
of Dakota, but the one source that has been talking about it highlights Sydney Sweeney. But yeah, I couldn't officially verify that story, but it's been circulating around nonetheless.
Well, I
Um,
wouldn't imagine that the producers would be upset about that, because that kind of seems to be the direction they were going,
yeah,
even if it was tongue in cheek, so to speak.
yeah, and we
I would
and
imagine they consider that good publicity still.
yeah, and and we before we recorded, me and the branch was watching that promo of Dakota Johnson herself telling us to go watch it, right? Where she talked very seductively. What do you say?
I didn't mean to click on that, actually. Uh, yes, but it's not what she was saying, but how she was saying it, right?
Yeah. She was talking like she was a late night phone caller on a hotline that someone might call
Right.
up.
A woman of the night.
Yeah. Um,
And so it was very, what, sultry or throaty. I don't know what. It's like
yeah,
somebody that smoked a bunch of cigarettes, kind of got that
it wasn't
raspiness
her
to it.
natural. It wasn't yeah, it wasn't her natural voice. Um, and
Yeah, she
then
was trying to
even
sound seductive,
yeah, and there was even
suggestive.
there was even a um, oh uh, social media um, ad for Madam Web where it's Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, and the others in um, girls in the movie, and they're asking them to summarize the movie in like one phrase. And Dakota Johnson says, "Spy, what is it? Spider, I hardly knew her," or something like that. And they each go to make a very semi-spiced pun, spider pun, a semi-spiced spider pun, um, as their descriptions for the movie, um, like
Now,
webbing
do you
and
mean
things like that.
spider as in like a peeping tom, like spying on her? Is that what that's meaning? Like, I don't quite get it. Is that what she was going for? Because otherwise, I don't understand what the joke was.
Yeah, it's weird, and like I think Sydney Sweeney or maybe it was one of the other ones, but when the video goes on, they ask them, they talk about shooting web, and it's a
Ugh.
reference to possibly something else.
Well,
Um,
that's kind of the commentary that I've been hearing about the guy in the theater who was shooting his own web, so to
so
speak.
it's
Yeah. So it seems like they might
so
be embracing that just a little bit.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
invoking a certain energy, a certain spell, a certain archetype, and
Well, see, that to me is the Scarlet Woman of Thelema. Then they're trying to subtly, uh, uh, you know, coax that sexual energy, which per, I find totally inappropriate for like a comic book type movie.
yeah,
I mean, think of how many
and
young people are going to see her naked on the runway like that. You know what I mean? That's really not okay, in my opinion.
yeah, I think Sydney Sweeney also told a story that she admires Dakota Johnson because one of the first movies she snuck into 50 Shades of Grey because she wasn't allowed to watch it, so she snuck into the theater and watched it.
Who did this again?
Sydney Sweeney.
Well, see, there you go, dude. Like, see how inappropriate that is? Like, she's too young to even watch the movie that her lead co-star was starring in, and now she's her big sis. So, like, what kind of conversations do you think they're having offset? You know, that
Yeah.
to me is really, that's tacky. Ugh. But hey, is that honestly a surprise in Hollywood? I mean, we've had some weird conversations in the past about what was it, the '70s show people,
Yeah.
and
It,
Ashton Kutcher, and just all sorts of child stars. I mean, it's really not a shock to hear that.
yeah.
Kind of makes sense, honestly, with the way they conduct business. Because some of the
Using
times these nepotism that occurs is actually satanic abuse as well. In some cases, wouldn't you agree? Or at least it's possible anyway.
yeah. The whole idea of like the Illuminati and all that, and
Our
the eyes wide
SRA,
shut society of it
satanic
all.
ritual abuse. Yes,
Yeah.
goodness sakes. So who knows what's going on there? I hope we don't hear anything weird like that.
Yeah.
Um,
A part
we're
of
now
that,
wading into the Valentine stuff, by the way.
yeah. Part of using that, the energy is releasing it, during a certain time period. So using all of this, or what we've been talking about with the sexual allure, um, and then they also released it on Valentine's Day, and again, that is part of the magic of it all, the magic marketing of it all, and so yeah, let's read a bit about Valentine's Day and Saint Valentine. Want to read us that branch?
Sure. And, you know, you saying that kind of made me think. Imagine how many people were having dinner and a movie and then probably went home and celebrated Valentine's Day together. And it's like, yeah, you really can't get away from the whole thing. Like I think they really were uh, tapping into this. It's kind of weird. Um, and so here we go. I'm surprised with pink being such a Valentine's Day thing, they didn't push Barbie back to Valentine's Day as well. But I don't know. Okay, so here it is Saint Valentine. In Italian, San Valentino, Latin Valentinus, was a 3rd century Roman saint commemorated in Western Christianity on February 14th and is in Eastern Orthodoxy on July 6th. From the High Middle Ages, his Saint's Day has been associated with the tradition of courtly love. He is also a patron saint of Tournai, epilepsy, and beekeepers. Oh, there's the queen bee kind of aspect there. Saint Valentine was a clergyman, either a priest or a bishop, in the Roman Empire who ministered to persecuted Christians. This is all alleged, by the way. He was martyred and his body buried on the Via Flaminia on February 14th, which has been observed as the feast of Saint Valentine since at least the 8th century. Relics of him were kept in the church and catacombs of Saint Valentino in Rome, which, quote, remained an important pilgrim site throughout the Middle Ages until the relics of Saint Valentine were transferred to the Church of Santa Prassede during the pontificate of Nicholas IV. His skull, crowned with flowers, is exhibited in the Basilica of Santa Maria in Cosmedium, Rome. Other relics of him are in Whitefriars Street, Carmelite Church, Dublin, Ireland, a popular place of pilgrimage, especially on St. Valentine's Day for those seeking love. At least 2 different St. Valentines are mentioned in the early martyrologies. St. Valentine of Rome, along with St. Valentine of Tournai. Quote, abstracts of the acts of the 2 saints were in nearly every church and monastery of Europe, according to Professor Jack B. Ulrich of the University of Kansas. It continues here with a little bit more.
Is
Saint
there?
Valentine. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, is there anything um on there about the holiday itself as well? Now that you read about Saint Valentine himself.
Is he a person? Yes. One moment. It kind of goes through this like pseudo church stuff, but uh, at its core, it's
Saint
actually a pagan
Valentine's Day.
holiday.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe read a little bit of
Um,
that.
Saint Valentine was also in the German or general Roman calendar for celebration as a simple feast until 1955, when Pope Pius VII reduced all such feasts to just a commemoration with another celebration. In 1969, revision of the general Roman calendar removed this mention, leaving it for inclusion only in local calendars such as that of the Balzan Malta. His commemoration was still on 1962 Roman Missal and is thus observed by those who, in circumstances indicated in Pope Benedict's the 16th, 2007, man, this article, I'm skipping that. July
Okay.
6th is the date on which the Eastern Orthodox Church celebrates the Roman presbyter Valentine. On January 30th, it observes the feast of Hero Martyr Valentine, Bishop of Interramana. We're still not getting to the story of him. The story is that he would secretly wed couples because the Romans were off to war, and they didn't want soldiers going AWOL and or not going into service. So I think they made the law or the edict that you could not marry. And so Saint Valentine then started wedding couples secretly, and then of course was found out eventually, and became a martyr. But that's the
Yeah.
general
Yeah.
ist
Thank you.
of
That's
this
yeah.
story.
Yeah. That's where I was
But
looking.
yeah, I'm sorry, it's a lot of minutia here. But
Yeah.
the actual holiday itself is pagan in origin, and it's known as Lupercalia, which is
Yes.
Luper is a reference to wolves. And so again, with this Roman aspect, they really venerated the wolves because Romulus and Remus drank from a she wolf. They suckled from her when they were, infants. And anyway, so this Lupercalia festival involved sacrificing goats. Of course, we're still on the heels of Capricorn, so that makes a lot of sense there. They would take the hide of the goat and cut it into strips, soak it in blood, and they would all run around naked, slapping one another with these raw hide whips that they had made covered in blood. So everybody would get these bloody lashes all over them. And of course, they were encouraged to have sex, and so in that sense, it was a fertility holiday. And
Yeah.
can you guess what somebody's zodiac sign would be if they were conceived on Valentine's Day? What would they then be born 9 months later? They ought to be born as Scorpio, I think, which is, of
Yeah.
course, a very that's pretty much on the nose here with the topic that we're talking about. So I think a lot of times when you look at what's going on during a certain time, it's always worthwhile to look at the 9 months later kind of thing to see what
Yeah.
the flip side meaning is to it.
Yeah.
For those that are conceived at
Some
that time.
astrologers even go off of what would the astrology be when you was conceived, rather than the day you was born. See,
And
that totally makes sense.
I agree with that. In fact, I think our understanding of the zodiacs is really based on conception date rather than birth date, because some people, after all, can be born early or late, and but what really matters is when you were conceived.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might be born as a Cancer in July, but really Cancer is represented by when you were conceived, right? So I think our understanding of the zodiac is it's not what it seems on the surface. Like
Yeah.
there's something very much deeper to it. Um, but
Yeah.
there was a lot of different pagan festivals that were celebrated prior to the church moving in. So whenever the church would move into an area, they would Christianize a already existing pagan festival that occurred at that time. So in this case, what they had done was they had whitewashed Lupercalia and reclothed it as Saint Valentine's Day. So all the pagans, all the people still practice their heathen holidays even today, under the guise of now it's a Christian holiday, right? Well, I'd say of course, October's Halloween is probably another one that's clearly pagan, right? But Halloween and St. Valentine's Day, I think, are the two most overtly pagan holidays that the church has kind of tried to Christianize. For instance, with Halloween, the day right after that is All Saints Day. So, it's like the church is kind of always there with their own version of an existing pagan holiday. And also, there are 7 hills in Rome, and each of these hills was associated with different cults and religious practices. So, I think one of them was dedicated to this time of year as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a little
Um,
background
yeah,
holiday.
thank you. Yeah. That gets into the whole like how fall, of course that's when the veil is thinnest, but springtime, that's also when the veil is thin, but one's a breath out, one's a breath in. That's why we also
Right.
see vampiric things and spiritual things happening in the springtime, just like Halloween. So, people, really like Halloween because of the spooky paranormal spiritual aspect. But that's when all the spirits are leaving. Springtime is the same thing, but it's when those spirits are coming back, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the parallels there. But yeah, I just wanted to mention it because Man and Webb did come on to Valentine's Day and playing on all of these um, archetypes and symbols and whatnots. And yeah,
And of
um,
course, the heart itself resembles a couple of different things. The heart shape, naturally, it resembles a woman's backside, particularly in certain poses. And then, of course, it also resembles a wolf's head. So we can still find traces of that um, symbolism in the holiday today, but also the color pink. Um, so you would have the red blood of sacrifice, which is again a very springtime thing. But you have the red blood mixed with white milk, and so they would mix milk and blood together, and that produced the color pink. And so
yeah,
some people would drink it, some people would just use it as paint when they're going around hitting people. But that was thought to induce fertility and virility and these sorts of things. So if you just
yeah,
pay attention, you can kind of see traces of that still today, and then understand like why it's still so prevalent. There's nothing Christian about it in a lot of ways, but I would like to kind of focus on this Saint Valentine thing here just for a moment longer, because
yeah,
here on the left, what do we have? It's the namesake of your channel, right? You got the chalice
yeah,
or the cup. The cup. Now this is the cup of Hermes, right? So you see the sun sitting in the chalice here. This cup is not spilled, so this would indicate a virginal aspect, a chastity, um, and the cup of Hermes is not spilled until ejaculation has commenced, right? So again, this is a theme around this time, right? Think of how many cups of Hermes got spilled a couple days ago, right? And then what do we have on the right side? the Christos cross, which is emblematic, of course, of chastity. You know, we could even make a fun story out of Valentine's Day using Mary Magdalene and Christ, or Joshua and Rahab. You know, there's a lot of these stories of like those two polarities coming together, but in a chaste way, right? It's not about lust, but love. And so, and also in that regard, marriage. So here we have the Hierophant as Saint Valentine performing a wedding of the lovers. So in that way, I think that we kind of see the tarot kind of reveal itself here too. Um,
Yeah, thank you for
except
pointing
with
that out.
except in this case, you would have Dakota Johnson as the high priestess, kind of doing the wedding ceremony in her own way.
Yeah. And also in the movie, one of her like Dakota Johnson's Cassandra Webb co-workers was supposed to be a young Uncle Ben, and there was another character in the movie. I forget who it was played by. It was it Emma Thompson, or it was one of the Emma's actresses. But she was pregnant, and she was supposed to be a young, Peter Parker's mother, and she was supposed to be pregnant with Peter Parker in the movie.
Oh wait, you mean in the Spider-Verse? That's the I remember that.
In the Madam Web movie. In the Madam Web
Oh,
movie.
but she was in the Spider-Verse though. She was pregnant, right? There was a lady.
Well, that's Spider-Woman. I'm talking about Peter Parker's mother, a young
Well, I
version
understand.
of
I'm
her.
just saying there's still that
Yeah,
vestigial
yeah,
trace of it.
yeah, yeah. Peter Parker's mother was supposed to be a side character, and she's pregnant with Peter, and then, like I
Very much
said,
an empress.
yeah, Cassandra Webb's co-worker who runs all the EMP stuff or whatever with her, was young Uncle Ben. So they're alluding to these people being around in the same universe, but without actually doing them. Yeah. So yeah, next is our romance films, and
Well, can we just take a look at the word real quick?
yeah,
What's contained within this word? We were just talking
Roman.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the whole
Rome.
essence of romanticism is this Valentine-esque Lupercalia infused idea of romantic love. This is more specifically, this is not chaste. This is not platonic. This is romantic. So automatically it's infused with, courtship and all this jazz.
Yeah, and that's another. I've talked about this before, and this is what I mean by when I say things like spiritual typecasting, and that is these actors and actresses. They act out these certain archetypes, and they get pigeonholed into these archetypes because they're channeling. That's something that was understood in Greek tragedies. They would, when they would don the masks of the gods of the myths that they would act out, they understood that they were channeling that in particular deity. And we get our idea of Hollywood from the Greek plays. Of course, the Romans took over the Greeks and then became the Roman plays. So Hollywood itself comes from this time period. And it's a lost art of understanding that they're invoking these archetypes and spirits and whatnot in Hollywood versus in its roots in these Greek plays. and that's where you get instances like the people who have played the Joker have warned people about not playing the Joker because they say it gets to them. The Batman villain, the Joker, and of course, you know, you had Heath Ledger, who played one of the most iconic versions of the Joker, and he, was a method actor. So you get into that whole end of things as well. So yeah, thank you for pointing out the whole romantic sort of thing. Yeah, if you want to read some of this branch, you can.
Well, I think since some of it's kind of self-explanatory, I'd prefer to just kind of dive into this lighthearted thing here, because this could maybe help to explain the why of Madam Web. Is it a chick flick? That's the hypothesis here, or a question, I guess. Chick flick is a term associated with romance films, mostly targeted to a female audience, arguably Barbie, or Barbieheimer, as we like to call it. Although many romance films may be targeted at women, it is not a defining characteristic of a romance film, and a quote chick flick does not necessarily have a romance as a central theme, revolve around the romantic involvement of characters, or even include a romantic relationship. As such, the terms cannot be used interchangeably. Films of this genre include Gilda, The Red Shoes, Sense and Sensibility, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Dirty Dancing, The Notebook, Dear John, A Walk to Remember, Thelma and Louise, 50 Shades of Grey. We were talking about that. Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, and Romeo and Juliet, which you said you and your mom just watched last night.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, if you wanted to go into the next tab, we can get into the Romeo and Juliet of it all. I believe that's the next one.
That's a perfect segue. Good eye.
Yeah, so on the topic of Romeo and Juliet, and talking about romance and where some of the things are rooted in, the rom-com or romance movie, romance film, owes part of its existence to William Shakespeare, actually. The idea of these romantic epics was really birthed from, Romeo and Juliet, the Twelfth Night, and so on and so forth. And in fact, to the point where in the 90s and early 2000s, which were the modern heyday for the modern rom-com or chick flicks, what they would do was they would just modernize Shakespearean plays. And that's what this article is about, or mention ones like, of course, Romeo and Juliet, that's the obvious one, but She's the Man, Oh, Drive Me Crazy, I Want to Date with Tad, and a bunch of others. Yeah, do you want to maybe read a little bit of that?
Okie dokie. So, taking it from the top here, article from February 9th, 2003 by Liz Armstrong. It's the month of romance. Happy February. With Valentine's Day just around the corner, or, well, past the corner now, we thought it would be fun to share how William Shakespeare's works have influenced our modern-day romance movies. It's no secret that Romeo and Juliet is the original and best-known romance of Shakespeare's, and that this play has influenced many movies, such as Disney's Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, and Romeo and Juliet. That's a clever one. Gnome as in gnomes. The popular play West Side Story, adapted into 1961 and 2001 film, is another obvious retelling. However, let's focus on just romantic comedies, and maybe you and your Valentine will want to snuggle up and watch one of these lighthearted and fun movies in a new light, knowing now that it was the bard himself that influenced them. So, a couple other examples. 10 Things I Hate About You is a retelling of The Taming of the Shrew. This is where you got the headstrong girl that's, tough exterior, but the shrew is tamed in the end, right? Okay, so in this classic 1999 rom-com featuring Heath Ledger, again, method actor you mentioned, and Julia Stiles, follows the plot line of The Taming of the Shrew, almost spot on. Patrick Verona is trying to convince Kat Stratford to go out with him, persuading her to do the normal girlfriend things like go to the prom. Although Shakespeare was going for a more housewife. In The Taming of the Shrew, the similarities are there. Just like Shakespeare's play, Kat's sister Bianca can't stop courting until her sister agrees to go out as well. Additionally, the characters' last names are Stratford. Shakespeare was born in Stratford upon Avon. And Verona. Many of his works are set in Verona, Italy. If that's not Shakespeare inspired, we aren't sure what is. She's the Man and Twelfth Night, featuring Channing Tatum and Amanda Bynes. This soccer and focused rom-com is one of the funniest out there. When Viola, Amanda Bynes' character, disguises herself as her twin brother Sebastian and attends a boarding school and joins the men's soccer team, she finds herself falling in love with her roommate, Channing Tatum. This is like Mulan, but soccer.
Yeah.
So where's the Shakespeare inspiration? Let's state the obvious. They use the same names, Duke, Viola, and Sebastian. And although Viola pretends to be a man in both the play and the movie, the reasoning is a little different. In Shakespeare's version, Viola does not protect herself and receive love from Duke Orsino. In the 2006 film, Viola just wants to play soccer. And when her woman's team gets cut, disguising her as herself as a twin brother seems to be the only option. Another example would be with Get Over It, A Midsummer Night's Dream. The 2001 film might be a little too obvious, but we can't deny that the inspiration was there. The star-crossed group of high schoolers do, in fact, star in a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. Besides putting on their own rock version of Shakespeare's play, this movie is a pretty loose adaptation of his work. Starring Kirsten Dunst, Ben Foster, and Mila Kunis, Shakespeare wouldn't have been the most appreciative of Martin Short as the theater director, as we all know. The Bard would have appreciated his humor. What are your favorite romantic comedies? Can you name any others, Chris, that come to mind?
We in our first science files we talked about some, one being serendipity.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we got that one. I think I was getting Drive Me Crazy confused with Get Over It, but yeah, same thing.
Well, both were included on, so you have me there.
Yeah. What's this article again? Oh yeah, this is another little expose on Shakespearean cinema. If you want to read it, you can. If you wanted to read it, you can, or if not, then we can just skip it.
It's a lot like the article we just read, even some of the same examples I see. So this is kind of, although it seems like this goes into a little more detail and has more examples.
Yeah.
But I guess the gist of this is why, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? So if you
Yeah,
want to have a banger Hollywood movie, uh, retell a Shakespearean love story or something like that.
yeah,
Um,
it,
why try to break the mold?
you know, when around the time rom-coms and shit like kind of went out of the mainstream was around the time they kind of stopped really focusing on adapting them from Shakespeare stuff. And now, just this past year, they they I forget the title of it, but they released another one, a rom com that's in the style of the early 2000 rom coms, but it's also based on a Shakespeare play, and apparently it's doing well. The reviews seem to be decent about it. Um, so yeah, the magic is there for the Shakespeare stuff for sure. Um,
Well, I would
and
just
so
have
the
to say, I wonder if this comes from a lack of classical training, and maybe that's why we keep seeing so much of this. But another thing is, I think because of the ESG, the economic, or excuse me, environmentally sustainable goals, or something like that, a lot of the money that they're trying to clamor for in these corporations and in producing movies and stuff is, oh, if we check these few boxes on the ESG score, we get a bunch of money and so on and so forth. So what we kind of see now is kind of like in schools how they teach to the SAT test. Well, now everybody focuses on how can I check these boxes on ESG score, and thus the wokeness was born out of that,
yeah,
I think.
yeah. So the point of us ending with Valentine's and Shakespeare and rom-coms is saying that you can have there's a difference between making a romantic film and making one that's just in it for the sex appeal. One is made with love and creativity, and the other one is just a marketing ploy. And it is not saying that, you need to be an extreme, modest prude. Um, that's not it. It's one is definitely a marketing um, example, and the other one is more of a creative, more romantically, divinely inspired example.
May
And
I
so you,
interject?
yeah,
Um, you just had me wondering about the future of film. And I keep hearing this from time to time about how eventually we're going to have AI movies that we ourselves are cast in, that the movie you're watching is going to be very unique in the sense that you yourself are going to be a character in the movie that you're watching, and that AI is going to create the whole thing, and people will stop going to movies altogether, and the whole movie star thing is going to become irrelevant because why go see somebody else in a movie when you can be in the movie, right? And so I wonder, even then, how successful it would be unless they are patterning the available content after Shakespearean templates, so to speak, or something like that,
yeah,
right?
like the thing with AI is just it's going reverse. We talked about the weavers with the crones and stuff, right? The moray, and AI is just the three fates, the three weavers, the crones is fate, will, and destiny, past, present, and future. And um, when you're out of balance, that is when things get, it's like they're warring, they're not working together. And AI is just feeding on everything old. So it's not working in that balance. That's why it's not natural. That it's not creating anything new. And I think that will only go so far. I mean, you have, the um, Gen Z and millennials going back to things like Christianity or other religions because of, they're looking for something, um,
The
that
structure.
connects them with, structure that connects with nature, and they're, flip phones are coming back in vogue, getting away from the smart devices. um, you have, this idea of millennials skipping their prime adult years and going straight from young adults to old crones, essentially, right? Not having the um, easy transition because they're, um, going off grid. They're farmsteading. They're homeschooling. They're they're starting to homeschool their babies. They're getting to apothecary, um, and herbalism, and again, like farming and stuff. And so the same thing with movies. You have, bootleg VHS people who are making VHS tapes of films, um, to make sure they have it in physical, physical media matter sort of thing. You have directors that advocate for it. You have directors that are, demanding that they shoot on film and not with a digital camera. You have a good example of that is Christopher Nolan from Oppenheimer, right? Um, he shoots on film. He, like Oppenheimer was shot on film, and it wasn't digital. And he also doesn't like all the digital gadgets of, um, that has become, prominent in Hollywood. And he really doesn't even like doing ADR, recording audio after the fact to make sure the audio is clear. He usually does little ADR, and he just uses what he records on site on set. And so, sometimes in his movies, um, people complain that the audio levels aren't perfectly adjusted, and it's because of that. And he's like, well, it's an imperfection of the art because I'm recording physically when I'm here. You have actors that work with him that's like, when he's around, I chuck my phone, right?
Right.
It's like it's like you're doing a Spartan, um, whole, you know like training. Like it's a movement. You're working together. Um, so you have these directors. Guillermo del Toro is another one. Um, there's, Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino. All of these guys, they're getting more traditional, or they're staying traditional in their ways. But also you have more indie films, um, that are starting to come up. They are really pushing against, the corporate Hollywood stuff, or they're trying to the best way that they can, excuse me, and still be in their and still work in the industry, right? So there is, a rebellion going, Ori bringing us to the beginning when I was talking about rebellion. There is a rebellion of the digital age, um, digital art, corporate art, corporate, um, Hollywood, and all that stuff. Um, so yeah, the future is in question, um, because of things like AI and what you're saying, branch. But there also is that there are still some renegades of hope out there.
It's kind of funny though that conservatism is the new punk in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
You made me think of punk cinema, which is really just somebody choosing to use film and you know present audio rather than
Yeah,
digital anything. It's almost like Luddite meets cinema. Um, we're going to do things the old way, and hearing those qualities in the audio, for instance, and knowing that there's something just a little bit off about it. Well, that kind of reminds me. I have a fondness for gems and such, and so something my mom kind of always didn't necessarily teach me, but I guess something I kind of picked up from her. She would rather have uh, a flawed diamond rather than a perfect one, because with the perfect one, somebody might just assume it's fake or cubic zirconia or something. Whereas if you had a flawed gem, diamond, sapphire, so on and so forth, maybe it has a black speck in it or an inclusion where it's just not quite perfect. Well, sure, but it's real.
yeah, exactly. And um, yeah, I mean, you've always had punks in cinema. You had for a while. I think it was in, if I'm getting the location right, it was the Germans. Um, they didn't like horror movies when horror movies started to become popular, and so you had a bunch of punks who would, get a camera and secretly record stuff, and then take scenes from like documentaries and stuff, and stitch footage they shot and things from like animal documentaries or whatever, and stitch them together and do like speakeasy s theaters, and they would play like punk music, like rock music, and they would play this like Frankenstein-esque film that they made. Um, and they would be like, a lot of times it would be horror themed, um, because that wasn't acceptable at the time. So, so yeah,
So
it's
what's
interesting.
punk for us now is for somebody to make a good movie.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
punk.
I I told you um before we started recording that I had recently watched The Holdovers, which is a holiday movie that came out in December, and I just recently watched it. And it was it just felt like a movie. And how much of a breath of fresh air was it to watch it and it just feel like a movie?
There was
Um,
no ulterior motive or
yeah,
messaging in it.
and well, that, and there is the acting was real. Uh, the the editing was loose. It wasn't just because we've gotten to the point where editing has become so robotic now, in a way, where it's like just a mid shot, a tight shot, a wide shot, all shot with like a 50 mil or something lens, and then um, it's just adjustment of that, and then everything is perfectly symmetrical, centered, and everything. And there's no really experimenting. There's no like dollying, and there's no um,
So they're getting lazy with it.
yeah. It's just like,
In a
oh,
way.
let's just do like, and that's become like the Hollywood or streaming norm. So seeing all these different cameras angles and transitions, and like it was just so fresh. And I've seen in the last like week, I've seen two other trailers for movies that come out in March that I won't give them away, but I possibly might do like a sign files for, because they judging by the trailer, since they're not out yet, they feel just like the holdovers. They feel like they're more in line, and they're both more smaller films. They're both more in line of just feeling like movies. And so if they pan out that way, could be interesting Stein Files, which
Okay.
we have a lot more. I guess this is a good time to start wrapping up. We do have a lot more um, episodes coming up, and ideas that we'll be getting to. Um, so look out for that. Thanks for watching, everyone. And again, we do have a whole spider symbol episode called Moray and the Fabric of Creation. Shout that out one more time. Is there any final thoughts that you wanted to say, Branch?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything that I wanted to discuss. So, yeah, thank you for allowing me to co-host with this topic.
Yeah,
And also, just a little bit of a plug. We did a really fun color episode with Mario from Symbolic Studies. So check that out too. If you want to learn a little
yeah,
more about color and how it relates to cinema and many other things, of course, that was a
yeah.
diverse
Mario,
episode.
yeah, Mario brought his very awesome symbolic expertise to that one. I love being able to talk with Mario.
Yeah, it was
So
a lot of
yeah,
fun.
yeah. And again, happy Valentine's Day, and may the romance be with you.
Until next time.
The next time.